beginning. I was there earlier this year, the first foreign leader to visit. It was my first visit of the year to announce significant military support to Ukraine and also a broader security relationship with them. We can't let this type of behaviour go unchecked. It impacts all of our security. We've already seen the impact it had on everyone's energy bills.
Rishi Sunak speaking there. Now, the US President Joe Biden has hit back at special counsel who described him as an elderly man with a poor memory. It comes after an investigation found he mishandled top-secret files and said he struggled to recall key life events. Biden has been accused of keeping classified national security material at home, but he won't face criminal charges. Special counsel Robert Hur said he chose not to bring criminal charges because the president cooperated and would likely be difficult to convict. In a surprise news briefing last night, Mr. Biden insisted his memory is fine.
I know there's some attention paid to some language in the report about my recollection of events. There's even reference that I don't remember when my son died. How in the hell dare he raise that?
Totally. How bad is your memory, and can you continue as president?
My memory is so bad I let you speak. That's
your memory has gotten worse, Mr. President?
My memory has not gotten. My memory is fine. My memory. Take a look at what I've done since I've become president.
In other news, British Airways says it plans to resume flights to and from Israel beginning in April. In a statement on their website, the airline said they will resume flights to Tel Aviv, but with a much reduced service from London Heathrow. British Airways suspended services to Tel Aviv amid the growing hostilities between Israel and Hamas, following the attack by the terror group on October the 7th. Junior doctors will go on strike for 5 days later this month in their long-running dispute over pay. The British Medical Association says that they will walk out between the 24th of February and the 28th of February. It comes after their latest talks with the government broke down. Health Secretary Victoria Atkins criticised the move, saying the actions show the BMA aren't ready to be reasonable when it comes to a pay offer. Meanwhile, Shadow Health Secretary Wes Streeting says the responsibility lies with the Prime Minister. And Tesco has announced the sale of its retail banking operations to Barclays in a deal worth around £600 million. Barclays is to take over Tesco Bank's credit cards, loans and saving accounts and has also agreed to market Tesco-branded banking services. Tesco will receive an income for the use of its brands and Barclays will participate in the Tesco Club Card scheme, the UK's largest loyalty programme. The retailer says the deal will help it trim its debts and allow it to focus on core retail business. 2,800 Tesco employees are to be transferred to Barclays under the agreement over the time. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Tom and Emily.
Well, Vladimir Putin sat down for the first time with a Western media outlet since his full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. The much-anticipated interview hosted by Tucker-Carlson was released in full last night.
During the 2-hour and 7-minute interview recorded in Moscow, Putin once again denied Ukraine's existence as a sovereign state, as well as blaming the West and NATO as the cause of the Ukraine war.
Well, the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, has since reacted to the interview by saying Putin's accusations are clearly ridiculous. The Russian president also accused Boris Johnson of scuppering a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine. The former Prime Minister has previously labelled these accusations as total nonsense and Russian propaganda. Should we take a listen to Putin giving his side of the story?
Well, let him cancel his decree and enter into negotiations. We have never refused. And the fact that they obeyed the demand or persuasion of Mr. Johnson, the former Prime Minister of Great Britain, seems ridiculous and very sad to me. Because, as Mr. Arakamiya put it, we could have stopped those hostilities with war a year and a half ago already. But the British persuaded us and we refused this. Where is Mr. Johnson now? And the war continues.
Well, we should say that we relied upon the Tucker-Carlson network for that translation, but Mr. Putin there, the president of Russia, seemingly having Boris at the forefront of his mind, blaming Boris for that continued war.
Well, joining us now is the Conservative MP for Scarborough and Whitby, Sir Robert Godwill. Sir Robert, thank you very much for joining us. You just heard Putin there in that very long interview with ex-Fox News host, I must say, Tucker Carlson there. Your reaction, saying that Boris Johnson sabotaged a peace deal back in the spring of 2022?
I mean, just complete nonsense. I mean, Putin, you can't believe a word he says. I think this is all about undermining the resolve of the Western nations to continue to support Ukraine. I've just flown in from Washington overnight, actually, and there, in the Senate, there was this big vote to sign off £60 billion of aid for Ukraine. And I'm sure, Putin is trying to portray the West as having missed a chance of having a peace deal. The only peace that you could have in Ukraine is for Russian forces to withdraw from Lugansk, withdraw from Donetsk, and also, I mean, the Crimea, which was occupied by the Russians some years ago now, that is also a source of contention. So, I don't think there's ever been the opportunity for a peace deal on the table. And in fact, the talk in Washington was that, Tucker Carlson is potentially being treasonous in actually, interviewing Putin, giving the guy a platform.
Well, that's a good question, isn't it? Do you think this is a form of treason?
Well, I'm not a lawyer, but I mean, certainly, giving him this platform, allowing him, without the normal sort of questioning, I think that you would, at GBNews, you would give, if I said something complete rubbish, you would hold me to account. It sounds like he's just given Putin the opportunity to put his side of the case. Putin is a war criminal. The war, the invasion of Ukraine was illegal. A load of people have been killed. There's been all sorts of terrible, horrific acts carried out by Russian troops in Ukraine. And Putin just needs to basically, if he wants peace, he should withdraw. This war's going on, and we need to keep our resolve in supporting them with the munitions. I mean, at the moment, the Russians are using about 10,000 shells a day. The Ukrainians have only got about 1,500 to 2,500 to respond. So, they need the munitions, they need the drones, they need all the equipment that we can continue to give them to ensure that they can keep Ukraine free. Because if Russia were to win this war, the plight of the Ukrainians would be too horrible to even imagine.
Now, Sir Robert, you say that while you were in the United States, the Senate, of course, passed this bill for a huge amount of aid to be given to Ukraine. It still has to go through the House, which does have a Republican majority. Did you get the sense while you were out there that there would be enough bipartisan support to get this aid out there?
I mean, the problem is it's all been conflated with the border issue. There's aid for Israel in the package as well. So, and the worry is that if we did have a change of administration in the autumn, then President Trump may not be as supportive as President Biden has been. And I think that's a real worry for us in the West, that we really need to keep the West together, not only, by the way, in combating, helping the Ukrainians, but also with the shipping being disrupted in the Red Sea as well. The West needs to act together, and this bizarre interview from Putin is about trying to undermine that and spreading fake news that might mean that people maybe in America feel less willing to support candidates that.
There is a growing there is a growing sense in the United States, though, among some voters that their government isn't prioritising domestic issues enough with the amount of money that is going towards Ukraine. There is that growing sentiment. Do you think that this interview may bolster that?
Yeah, I'm sure that's exactly what it was designed to do, and that's why I'm so appalled that Tucker Carlson gave President Putin this platform to make these points. We really do to ensure that we do continue to support Ukraine, and the Americans in particular, given their tremendous military capacity in terms of manufacturing and equipment, they need to be up there as well, because without America, the Ukrainian situation would just go from bad to worse, and we would see Russia making gains, which we do not want to see. So I think Putin, he's a very calculating, wily old fox. He knows exactly what he's doing, spreading lies, spreading fake news in an attempt to undermine us and our allies who are supporting Ukraine.
Now, Sir Robert, I know you've had a long and distinguished career in Parliament and are standing down at the next election, but you must look at the state of the polls, your own party down to bumping around 20%, around 1 in 5 voters backing the Conservative Party, and thinking, gosh, what on earth can be done? You might have heard that some of your colleagues have now started to say perhaps Boris Johnson needs to be brought back into the team, perhaps not as a Member of Parliament, but maybe as a cheerleader, being part of this election effort. What do you make of those calls?
I don't think that would make the situation any better. I mean, Boris stood down from Parliament. He can't become leader of the Conservative Party from that situation. And, yes, we brought back David Cameron, who I think has been a fantastic Foreign Secretary. My view is bringing Boris back would not make any difference. In fact, let's go back over the reasons why Boris went. He had his chance, and things went wrong, and the party got rid of him. We'd look ridiculous were we to certainly if we're to bring Boris back as leader. But I don't particularly think Boris has a role in government. Rishi's doing a good job, and of course, there's about 20% of people still undecided. We had a by-election on Thursday, which actually showed we picked up a seat from Labour. So although the polls are showing there's wide support for Labour, it's not deep support, and I think we need to give them more reasons for voting for us. And bringing back Boris is, I don't think, one of them. Being united and singing from the same hymn sheet, I think, is more important, and that's where I think some of my colleagues need to sort of understand that united parties win elections, divided parties lose them, and we need to get behind Rishi, who's doing a good job. And of course, the economy's starting to come round. We've got the budget coming. There is still time to improve the situation. And so 20% of people are still undecided, and I think they're waiting for a reason to vote for us.
Yeah, well, thank you very much indeed for your time. Sir Robert Goodwill, Conservative MP for Scarborough and Whitby, great to talk to you. We'll be having that debate later.
We will be. Whether
it is time to bring back Boris. I'm seeing already in the inbox that some of you think absolutely not, under no conditions. Others would love to see him back.
It's interesting.
So there you go.
It's very, very interesting, because looking at where the Conservative Party is in the polls today, and looking at where the Conservative Party was in the polls under the doldrums of the Boris Johnson premiership, they're not even comparable.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, you did have Liz Truss in the middle there.
Yeah, but Rishi Sunak did then build up again, but now he's back down again. Liz Truss was around 21 points in the polls when everyone thought that she should be turfed out. Now Rishi Sunak's at around 21 points in the polls. But obviously, many, many Conservative MPs think that yet another leadership psychodrama
I mean, the argument
is
that it's more about the brand. You could put anyone at the top and it wouldn't be enough to change the fortunes of the party. But shall we go back to that Putin interview now? Because joining us live from Warsaw is Polish journalist Michał Rahon. Thank you very much, Michał, for joining us on the show. Now, must say, I did tune in to quite a large amount of the interview. It was very, very long indeed. It did appear as though Putin massively had the upper hand, like he was leading and managing the interview rather than Tucker-Carlson himself. A very long monologue about Russian history going back to the 600s.
Well, the thing and the reason for which Vladimir Putin, or Vladimir Putler, as we call it, this person here, always comes back to the history is because the old tradition of KGB is to make history a tool to use it as a political leverage. We've seen that and we've heard that back in 2009, exactly the same blatant lies about the history of Russia. And actually, he uses the history as a kind of justification, or actually twisted version of history as a justification of current activities of this ex-KGB colonel who is now ruling Russia. We've heard that back in 2009, during the 70th anniversary of the Second World War in Poland, where he basically claimed that Poland is a state responsible for the Second World War, not Germany, not Russia, as if the Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact never existed. existed. So the reason why he does it now is that he uses it as a political tool to project the political future, the geopolitical future, which is basically known as a common geopolitical space between Lisbon and Vladivostok. This is the way it was always sold in the reset era after the infamous reset button push and infamous policies of, sorry to say that, my government of my state back then in between 2007 and 2014. So nothing new. Putin uses history or twisted version of history to justify the crimes that we are witnessing in Ukraine right now, but in many other places, in Chechnya, in Georgia, you name it.
Yes, it's absolutely fascinating to see which particular bits of history Putin decides to include in his narrative and which bits he leaves out. The Soviet-Nazi pact, as you mentioned, Molotov-Ribbentrop, seemingly forgotten by Putin in his history of where Nazis may or may not have been. But I want to ask you about the crucial part, perhaps. The crucial part of this interview where Putin says he's only after Ukraine. He doesn't want to go for Poland or Latvia or Lithuania or Moldova or any of these countries. It's only Ukraine. Although I suppose, Michal, that's what he said initially. He said he didn't want to invade Ukraine, and then he did.
Well, there is no war in Ukraine, according to Mr. Putler. So the thing is, if he says that he's not interested in anything more except Ukraine, and still he thinks that collapse of the Soviet Union was the biggest geopolitical nightmare of the 20th century, and his goal is to re-establish it in a way. So what does it mean in practice? I mean, it means that he is interested in all the sovereign states that are now outside the Russian Federation, which means that Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, Ukraine, Belarus actually is digested already, Poland, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, half of Germany, and other states, Finland in a way, are on his wish list. I mean, he's a Chekist, he's a communist, he's a KGB colonel. He is lying every time he moves his lips.
Well, thank you very much indeed for talking to us. Michal Rahon, great to speak to you. You are a Polish journalist coming live from Warsaw.
And
the problem is, though, the problem is that there is a growing number of people in the United States and in this country in the West who are concerned about the amount of money, because there are so many domestic issues, concerned about the amount of money that is going to this war.
And yet
you can't escape that.
You look at the amount of money that the United States spend on its military. It's about a third of its federal budget. They have never spent better money than on Ukraine. The amount of money they poured into Afghanistan, into Iraq, so much more than they've given to Ukraine. It is the best investment they could possibly make. They are decimating the Russian military for pennies compared to what they threw into the Middle East, for pennies compared to what they spent, to what Ronald Reagan spent on his Star Wars programme. He spent 8 years trying to bankrupt the Soviet Union, didn't quite manage it. Look, the United States today is managing it for a fraction of the cost that Reagan spent.
Well, I hope that it comes to a conclusion sooner rather than
but it is
later.
really, really interesting and important to listen to the perspective of the countries like Poland that are right there on the border of Ukraine, that feel the fear of what a Russian juggernaut might do if it's successful.
Well, quite. But there is a growing concern over President Biden's abilities, with a scathing report suggesting the US leader has significant limitations with his memory. We're asking, is he fit to lead? That's after the break.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Claire, you want to talk by cars growing by a couple of centimetres a year?
Yeah, well, 1 centimetre every 2 years.
Okay.
It's unrelenting because the people are so fixated on the big SUVs. The sales have gone through the roof, and yet it's James Nix, the analyst for Transport and Environment Campaign, said the author of the report on the trend said, spurred on by sales of the largest SUVs, vehicles are getting wider every year. Now, what does that mean for us? Well, it means that our roads weren't...
Comfortable ride, beautiful engines, smooth. I mean, it's luxury, it's gorgeous.
Well, as I know, I used to have two, but I don't...
You used to have two SUVs?
Well, one SUV at a time, but I had two brands of them. But I'd no longer drive in London now because I just don't see the point, because of the ULEZ, because of the, you know, you can run down a thing and get fined.
Parking spaces, whatever.
The growth in car size also causes issues for their drivers. The report found that largely luxury SUVs, which are about 2 metres wide, no longer fit in off-street parking.
That's true.
They also leave too little space for passengers to get in and out of the vehicles in typical off-street spaces, and they're about 2.4 metres wide, the report found. And I'll tell you, I was stuck in a bus last night trying to get home, and the buses couldn't move because the streets were too crammed with all of these massive cars either side.
Chelsea tractors.
And it was gridlocked.
Yeah, but maybe they're not the problem. Maybe the buses are the problem.
The buses take people to their place of work and get
I'd
them
like
home.
to know when, because when I go through London, all I see is empty buses.
Oh, you're lucky. Every time I'm on one, they're full.
Well, they're obviously only full at rush hour. You see, the thing is, property developers, when they do high-rise car parks, or they build a multiplex cinema and there's a car park attached to it, that's not my fault that I can't fit into their space. It's their fault. So
well, it's all driven by money, isn't it? The more spaces that they have,
exactly.
the more people they can get.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Shall we turn to the inbox?
Let's do that. We've been talking about whether or not Rishi Sunak should bring back Boris in any capacity to try and aid his ailing election hopes. John Taylor has written in. Hi, John. He says, in reference to our Sir Robert Goodwill, the Conservative MP interview, he says, Sir Robert Goodwill thinks bringing back Boris would make the Conservative Party look ridiculous. Doesn't he realise they already look ridiculous for getting rid of him? Goodness, these Tory MPs need a metaphorical kicking.
And David in Scarborough says, I'm a constituent of Sir Robert Goodwill and I left the party because of the ousting of Boris. So there you go. And he goes on to say he's very angry at the removal of Boris.
Whereas Barbara has written in to say, do we really want a man that lied repeatedly to our sovereign queen and lied to us repeatedly on TV have anything to do with government? Barbara is not a fan.
We also asked Sir Robert Goodwill if he'd go as far as to say that Tucker-Carlson interviewing Vladimir Putin was a form of treason. Alison says to suggest that is absolutely ludicrous. The man is a journalist and has secured an interview most would kill for. Anyone with half a brain knows Putin lied through his teeth, so zero harm done. There is that.
And Paul says, morning, I'd love Boris... It's afternoon, by the way. Would love Boris to come back. If he stood in any of the by-elections in May, he would win with massive majorities. Fact.
Yes, the clue's in the name. Good afternoon, Britain. There you go.
Confident on Boris's electoral abilities. But shall we turn to the Labour Party now? Because as Labour ditches its pledge to spend £28 billion on its flagship Green Prosperity Plan, farmers across Britain are adjusting to new payment schemes that offer grants to those who farm in an environmentally friendly way.
Yes, so for years, farmers were offered a basic payment for simply growing food. Now, sustainable incentives like encouraging wildlife and reducing chemicals earn cash instead. It's all part of the government's net zero plan to decarbonise the country by 2050. Our East Midlands reporter Will Hollis has the story from Lincoln.
Green ambitions, not just a labour of love for politicians. Robert's family has been farming wheat and barley from Branston near Lincoln for 4 generations. He says net zero is one of the biggest challenges in his lifetime working the land.
I think it's very important that we do move towards net zero I can't think how I personally will become a zero carbon farmer because I still use fertiliser, I still use diesel in my tractors.
The basic payment scheme is ending. Simply farming alone won't be as profitable. The government says it's building a rural economy based on sustainability by encouraging wildlife and reducing chemicals.
On this side, it's ploughed, ready for a crop of peas that will grow this springtime. And then on this side, we have an area that's left next to the woodland, which will be in the Sustainable Farming Incentive, for which I will receive a small payment.
Some farmers worry that freeing up land to reduce carbon will mean more imports from abroad. A spokesperson from the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs said, "We've committed to maintaining the £2.4 billion annual farming budget, which will support farmers to produce food profitably and sustainably." In the week that global temperatures passed the 1.5 degrees target for the first time, in Lincolnshire, the snow is settling.
Straight towards the Magic Smiles.
At the county's annual farming conference, the focus is on the future and carbon. Agriculture produces 10% of the country's carbon footprint. The government is aiming for net zero by 2050, and farming will play a big part in its success or failure. Kelly Hewson-Fisher is chair of the conference.
We need to think very differently about what the future looks like to be able to really integrate the opportunities that we're being provided with.
Michael, a farmer in Shropshire and director of the Green Farm Collective, is making sustainability work, but says it's a challenge.
We can grow high-quality food in significant volumes alongside helping nature recovery.
Feeding the nation is no small task. Meanwhile, the green goal becomes even bigger. Will Hollis, GB News in Lincoln.
Thanks to Will for that. Shortly, we'll be speaking to a Wales-based farmer to ask, could net zero kill off the UK's agricultural sector? Well, that's after your headlines with Sophia. This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Thanks, Tom. From the GB newsroom at 12:31. First, some breaking news. Essex Police has confirmed that 2 dogs that fatally attacked a grandmother in Jaywick were ex-L bullies. 68-year-old Esther Martin was reportedly visiting her 11-year-old grandson when she was attacked on Saturday. The 2 dogs were destroyed. A 39-year-old man was arrested on suspicion of dangerous dog offences, but has been released on conditional bail until March. The Prime Minister says President Vladimir Putin's accusations that the West and NATO are the cause of the Ukraine war are clearly ridiculous. In an interview with TV presenter Tucker Carlson, the Russian president says the invasion was necessary to prevent Ukraine from posing a threat to Russia by joining NATO. Meanwhile, Putin also told Carlson that he has no interest in expanding the war or to having any dialogue with US President Biden unless certain demands are met. Rishi Sunak vowed the UK's continued support of Ukraine.
Clearly ridiculous. Russia conducted an illegal, unprovoked invasion of Ukraine. I'm proud that the UK has stood strongly with Ukraine from the beginning. I was there earlier this year, the first foreign leader to visit. It was my first visit of the year to announce significant military support to Ukraine and also a broader security relationship with them. We can't let this type of behaviour go unchecked. It impacts all of our security. We've already seen the impact it had on everyone's energy bills.
US President Joe Biden has hit back at special counsel who described him as an elderly man with a poor memory. It comes after an investigation found he mishandled top-secret files and said he struggled to recall key life events. In a surprise news briefing last night, Mr. Biden insisted his memory is fine. Biden has been accused of keeping classified national security material at home, but he won't face criminal charges. And junior doctors will go on strike again later this month in their long-running dispute over pay. The British Medical Association says they'll walk out between the 24th of February and the 28th of February. It comes after talks between their union and the government broke down again. The union said the government had failed to meet the deadline to put an improved pay offer on the table. However, Health Secretary Victoria Atkins says that the action called by the BMA Junior Doctor Committee does not signal that they're ready to be reasonable. For the latest story, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Patrick Christie's Tonight. Weekdays from 9 p.m.
We have let Islamist extremism into Britain, we've let it fester, and now we've let it win. Our absolutely spineless surrender merchant political top brass are rolling over while government ministers wear stab vests and quit their jobs in fear. Veteran Tory Minister Mike Freer has had death threats from Islamists as well as an alleged arson attack on his office. The motive there has still not been established. He's standing down because he doesn't want to die. I cannot emphasise how important this is. A minister of the government is quitting his job because he doesn't want to be killed by a lunatic jihadi. And our Prime Minister has said absolutely nothing. Nothing. A spokesman for Rishi Sunak said he was saddened. Is that it? Our Prime Minister should have been out on the steps of Downing Street saying that we will not be intimidated. We will not let this continue. Enough is enough. What does he do instead? He tweets about XL bullies. Yeah, fantastic. Where's Keir Starmer on this? Well, he's conducting focus groups on how to get the Muslim vote back, so he's hardly going to come out all guns blazing, is he? Ed Davey? Well, there's no way a Liberal Democrat leader would come out and admit that his ideology has helped turn Britain into a poster nation for multicultural failure. The police have let protesters, which include rabid anti-Semites, rampage around London every flipping Saturday for the last 3 months, and today they are finally saying that they don't support some of the protests, which in the past have included a now banned terror group and people holding up anti-Jewish signs. They're saying, please don't march down Whitehall. All right, but will you do anything to stop them if they ignore you? I doubt it. I honestly cannot believe that we have sunk to the level where a serving minister stands down because of threats from extremists and our Prime Minister just doesn't feel the need to address it.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 12:36. You're watching Good Afternoon Britain. Now, as the Labour Party ditches its £28 billion green prosperity plan, farmers in Britain are adjusting to new payment schemes. Instead of an allowance for growing food, farmers are being offered grants for environmentally friendly farming.
But there's growing concerns that net zero might kill off British farming. It comes as unrest ripples through the EU. We've seen protests in France, Spain and Poland and Germany against EU climate change policies, pay and other issues experienced by farmers.
And there's been some movement there, hasn't there? But joining us now is Wales-based farmer and broadcaster Gareth Wyn-Jones. Gareth, thank you very much for joining us on the show. We heard a little bit earlier from farmers in Lincoln. It's quite a tricky time to be in the agricultural sector in Britain. We've seen uprising from farmers across the European Union. In your view, how damaging have net zero regulations been to the industry?
Well, it's just absolutely bonkers. You know, on an island so small as we are, losing more land, you know, to plant trees, solar farms, developments. We need new houses. I'm not against that, but let's go to Wales to begin with, okay? So agriculture has devolved, so we've got our own assembly, So we've got the SFS, which is the Sustainable Farming Scheme, which is an absolute disaster. They want 10% of all farming land to go under trees. Now, yeah, let's think about this. How are we going to be producing enough food to feed our nation? We only produce enough food, you know, for 60% of the year now. So we're going to go hungry. We are sleepwalking into food shortages.
Gareth, how did they come? Do you have any idea how they came up with the number of 10% of land going towards trees? Was that plucked out of nowhere, or is there some basis for that figure?
Well, they want to save the planet, don't they? So they've shut Tata Steel down, so we've got nowhere to produce, you know, raw steel in this country now. And now they're pointing the finger at the farmer. There's other rules and regulations. We've got NVZs where we're not allowed to carry slurry and manure over the winter months. Now, that's going to cost hundreds of thousands of pounds to, you know, independent businesses that haven't got the money. We're going to lose 5,500 people out of our industry in the next few years if this SFS comes into, you know, into play, and we're going to lose hundreds and thousands of livestock. You know, the animals that we can use to turn that green stuff outside into top quality protein, as in beef, lamb, milk as well. You know, all these things are massive. And let me tell you something which is going to scare you all. And it's important, this message, OK? The subsidies that we had after the Second World War was the CAP, you know, the Common Agricultural Policy. That was set up because people were on rations and there wasn't any food. So they dug for victory. The British public came together to produce, you know, food. And that's where the European Union came in with these subsidies.
But Gareth, farmers hated the CAP.
No, let me just get this point. No, it's really important, this point. Let me just finish, because that money now is going into environmental schemes, which is fine, and you know, to plant trees and to plant, you know, wild meadows. But when we're producing that food in this country now and we're not getting subsidised, that has to knock on to the general public. So that food will go from, yeah, you might be shocked. It won't be twice. It'll be 3 times as more expensive. You know, and the economy as it is on its backside. Do the general public want to be paying 3 times as much for their food? There is only 1.8% of farmers that are producing food to feed 98% of the public.
Gareth, I know I've spoken to many farmers in England, Wales, Scotland, across the United Kingdom, who, during the Brexit referendum, decided to vote leave. Most farmers voted leave compared to voting remain, mainly because the Common Agricultural Policy, as it was designed mostly by the French, didn't really fit the United Kingdom that well. People got more money depending on how much land they owned rather than how much food they produced. Are you saying that we've got rid of an old bad system and replaced it with a not particularly better system? What would you like to see perhaps that's different from the current one or the EU one?
Well, to begin with, I voted Remain, OK? So I'm one of the farmers that voted to stay in Europe. Look, the system wasn't working, and I agree with a lot of people, you know, it was broken. But by God, this isn't going to fix it. This is not going to fix it. We are digging ourselves and sleepwalking into food shortages. And if we're not, you know, really, really careful on a small island like we are, and we, you know, the global economy and the global situation. Why are the French farmers? Why are the German farmers? Why are the Dutch farmers? Why are the Spanish? Why are all these farmers out protesting? Because there's a bigger picture. You know, the governments are trying to take away our God-given right to produce food and to feed people affordably. I want a nice environment, you know. I want to see our hedgehogs and our hedgerows. But look, government brought policies after the Second World War for us to rip hedgerows out. And that's what happened. You know, the fields got bigger, machinery got bigger. Now they're paying us to put hedgerows back. And I'm not against hedgerows. I'm not against planting the right tree in the right place. But by God, we have to have a sensible approach to this, or we will go hungry. And the people that are going to suffer the most are the people that are the poorest. And that's always the first ones to be hit. So let's be careful going forward. We need to build a better Britain on our bellies, and we need a farming food revolution worldwide, and start to think that you are going to need a farmer every single day of your life. Every single day, you're going to need somebody like me to be producing food and putting that on your plate.
Thank you very much indeed for your time, Gareth. It's been great to speak to you, Gareth Wyn-Jones, who is, of course, a farmer and a broadcaster in Wales. Do you know what I don't understand is why make it more difficult for farmers in this country? You're just going to have to import more from other countries, which is obviously is going to cost more carbon.
No, we should make it a lot easier for farmers to do a lot more. But just some breaking news to bring you before the break. The Duke of Sussex has settled the remaining parts of his phone hacking claim against Mirror Group newspapers. That's according to his barrister, who earlier told that to the High Court.
Yes, so he has now settled the remaining parts of his phone hacking claim against Mirror Group newspapers, according to his barrister.
One of his many, many lawsuits.
Many, yes, and he's been in Las Vegas overnight, doing some kind of ceremony.
Yes,
giving out awards to the NFL, was it?
Didn't mention his father in the awards giving ceremony. But there we go. Much more to come after the break. A brand new cookie is being released, including an entire Cadbury's cream egg within it. With growing concern over the health of the nation, we'll be speaking to a Lord, a former health minister, who's very critical of junk food brands. Don't go anywhere.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
The Camilla Tominey Show, Sunday mornings from 9:30.
What you've got to do is it's a collective. You've got to look like a meteorologist. Nobody out there is necessarily going to be a meteorologist, but what I do on a daily basis is I look globally. I look at what we've got in terms of the track of weather that we've had in the UK. So if you go back a couple of years and we go back to the heat wave of July, August 2022, 40.3 degrees, there's a dot in the landscape, and before then there was other incidents going on. Now that was a huge dot because that was extreme temperatures, and then we, since then, last summer, although we didn't get that kind of record, we saw months with records, various months, May and June and September and October, all-time records. So another dot, and then you're looking again globally. What's going on globally? What's going on in China, in USA, in Africa, now in Australia, for example, records falling like 9 pins. So when these storms come along, you've got to say, OK, would they have happened anyway? The answer is probably yes. They probably would have done. But when you start getting where we're up to with Jocelyn is number 10, then that's not the record. The record is 11. Named storms, 2015-16. So we've been there before, but only a few years ago. So these things are starting to mount up. And do you know what? On the can of climate change, climatologists, better people than me, people who study this expertly, and they look at it and they say, OK, what we're going to get with extra dimension of heat in the atmosphere, which energy and heat that basically means that you've got more intense storms potentially that can carry more water. What do you get? You get higher wind velocities and you get more water and or snow. We've just gone through a period where parts of this country have been deluged and flooded for the first time.
Yes. I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's coming up to 10 minutes to 1. And have you got a sweet tooth? If you do, we have some exciting, see what we did there, exciting news for you, because Domino's has joined forces with Cadbury and released brand new limited edition cookies. in which cookie dough will be stuffed with a whole Cadbury cream egg before being baked.
Not sure that's my cup of tea. It's fair to say the announcement has divided the public. Look at it there, oozing out, with some welcoming the gooey goodness and others calling it outright gluttony, and some going even further, including...
Well, the former Health Minister, Lord Bethell, has called the move disgusting, saying the executive team, board and shareholders of the two companies should be ashamed of themselves. We're delighted to say that he joins us now in the studio and has brought along some goodies of his own. What are we looking at here, Lord Bethell?
Well, Tom, at the moment there is a battle for the breakfast table, and in the escalating combat to put more and more sugar in our cereals, chocolate is now the new weapon of choice. And the cereal companies are literally using confectionery, sweets, that you would normally see being sold to children in a sweet shop, put on the breakfast table. So this one here, Oreos, that's a biscuit that you're meant to have with your tea. This one, traditional sugary cereal, has been upped the ante, and that's got 30 grams of sugar per 100 gram. This is completely inappropriate for children to be eating first thing in the morning. It leads to a massive sugar high, it destroys their teeth, and it's led to the obesity boom that we've got at the moment that's really destroying the prospects for a lot of our kids.
Not even once in a while? Do you want these things banned?
No, I don't. Listen, what frustrates me about this is that the big corporates behind these brands have got huge power to define the food environment we live in. And they choose to use that power in this way. That's why I'm so angry about what they've done, because they've got something that is really valuable and they're putting it to this use to maximise their profits and really to destroy the health of the kids in our nation.
Should we blame shareholders for the company for making something they think will sell? Should we be looking at the other end of the spectrum here? Isn't this really about parents making choices for their children? If I, as an adult, want to buy a chocolate shreddy, I should be able to, surely.
Yeah.
Surely we should be encouraging parents to be making better choices for their children rather than going after companies for making things they think will sell.
I'm pro-choice, and I don't like to see the state being involved in breakfast choices. On the other hand, you have to be honest and say that those choices take place in an environment that is very, very potent, and these are addictive products. So the cream egg cookie that you pointed out, that's got just the right mixture of fat and sugar in it that means that it leaves you yearning for another one the next day.
Yeah, but come on, no one goes to Domino's or Cadbury for that matter for healthy goods, do they? You know, when you go to Domino's, it's because you're in a fat mood and you want as many calories as possible on that day. You're unlikely to have it every day, are you? People aren't likely to have these types of cream egg cookie dough monstrosity every day, are they?
Well,
It's a treat.
Emily, that is true probably for you, but for a lot of people, they only eat food that is prepared by someone else. Half the food in this country that we eat as a country is now prepared by someone else, and that means Domino's, Deliveroo and these kinds of companies. And people aren't aware of what's inside the food because they didn't prepare it themselves, and the food often contains, as I said, that highly processed element that is really difficult to give up. And if you regularly eat this kind of stuff, you're going to find it very, very difficult to stop one day.
And yet, that is someone's choice. If they want to eat more food that happens to be fairly delicious. Now, other brands are available than Cadbury's cream eggs, but I think these are just a very good example of something that is packed with calories.
What are you doing with that?
But perhaps you might have once in a while. What policy recommendations are you actually making for people that might want to just,
You're right. It is up to people to choose what they eat. But the consequences for the country are now enormous. We have a massive obesity problem. People are not active. Half the country is either overweight or obese, and it's costing us a fortune in lost productivity, people dropping out of the workforce, not paying taxes, living on welfare as a result. We literally can't afford it. And I wouldn't be on this sofa if there wasn't a very serious consequence to these cereals.
But it is cheaper to buy carrots and celery and you can spend a few pennies on these things, whereas buying a 10-pack of Cadbury cream eggs today, I spent £6 on this.
Cheaper per calorie, though.
You're right.
Per calorie.
But that is what is often presented to you as your choice when you go to the shop, the cream egg. And it's also extremely addictive. You have that pack, and you will find yourself yearning for another one the next day. It really creeps up on you. Giving up sugar is tougher than giving up smoking or many other things.
May I ask, because a lot of the people who get most exercised about this issue are reformed, overweight people. Were you previously, you know, had a few extra pounds, you got slim, ate more healthily, and now you want to spread the goodwill and learnings to everyone else?
I mean, I'm disappointed to tell you that no, I've always been.
I thought you were reformed.
But I was minister during COVID, and I saw for myself when we were speaking to the ICU units for nearly a year, and the doctors described how there would be a queue of people waiting who were, by far, most of them were basically obese. And if you're carrying diabetes and extra weight, you can't fight something like COVID or other diseases like heart disease and liver disease.
But
it leaves you
the
really...
regulations that we've seen in the wake of COVID, changing the layout of supermarkets and putting things in different places, they're clearly not working. Banning adverts clearly isn't working. Something that does work is the new brand of injections, like semaglutide, Ozempic, these things that are now... Like, surely they're a better solution than trying to regulate the way supermarkets...
Tom, you are right that they haven't worked because they got binned. Boris got very passionate about his obesity strategy.
You're not allowed to have sweets on the end of an aisle.
So the obesity strategy essentially got binned. It's meant to be introduced at the end of next year. And the reason why these things...
changed the insides of...
I know, they anticipated the law, because actually it doesn't matter.
Well, we could debate this all day, but thank you very much indeed for coming into
yes,
the...
thank you, and for bringing all of your chocolate treats, which I hope we can keep.
And you've put me off that cookie dough cream egg monstrosity. Anyway, GB News has reached out to Domino's, Cadbury's, Nestle and Kellogg's for a statement, and the following replied. Kellogg's say, we offer a broad range of cereals to meet our shoppers' needs, whether that's an indulgent cereal for a treat or a family breakfast cereal that's lower in sugar. We understand we have a role to help people make healthier choices. That's why since 2011 we've reduced sugar across our cereals by 18% and salt by 23%. For those wanting a lower sugar option, many of our cereals, including cornflakes, Rice Krispies, Cocoa Pops and Special K Original, are classed as non-high in fat, salt and sugar using the government's own nutrition standards. 4 out of 5 top-selling cereals are non-HFSS.
Now, Domino's say at just over 370 calories per cookie, they're in line with the content of many other treats available on the high street. We know our customers love to share our existing cookies, and we expect they will do the same with the new cream egg cookies.
There you go, low-calorie option, Nestle says. Nestle has done a lot of work to reduce sugar in its cereals over the last decade. Nestle has been consistent that it is open to the idea of effective regulation in the UK that drives desired health outcomes.
Goodness me, we've got through all of that. It's important in journalism to get a right of reply when you reach out, but my goodness, what a mouthful.
Well, that's all for this hour, but stay with us because we'll be debating whether Rishi Sunak should bring back Boris Johnson. Last chance saloon, it's Good Afternoon Britain on GB News.
(2024), a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Francis, Just Stop Oil have in the past broken the law. I remember distinctly the Dartford crossing. That ended up with 2 jailed, I believe, if I remember correctly. Is it ever justified in your view?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. I mean, I would have to say yes. I mean, we're trying to preserve my life, your lives, the lives of your family, and it's not just the planet that we're trying to protect, it's the lives of millions of people. And, you know, we know from history that we have to break the law in order to put pressure on the government and to be listened to.
No one would doubt your sincerity in your views. You genuinely believe in what you fight for. But there are others who think differently. For example, there are Islamist extremists who believe that people will go to hell unless they convert to Islam. They will sincerely, perhaps, break the law in order to force people to convert. In their view, they might be saving people's lives for eternity. There might be abortion activists who say that babies are being murdered and to save their lives we need to break the law to stop people having abortions. Why do you get to say that your moral conviction is the one that's right and other people's individual moral conviction are those that are wrong?
So what's really integral to the Just Stop Oil campaign is the fact that it is a non-violent campaign. That's what separates us from the examples that you've just given. We're absolutely dedicated non-violence, both as a tactic and as a principle. So though we might be breaking the law...
If individuals take it upon themselves to break the law for whatever their course is, surely the way that we decide what society wants in general is democratic and within the law.
Well, of course, we know also that protest is absolutely integral to maintaining and upholding a democracy, and in particular, non-violent protest. I mean, I really can't express to you how severe this situation is, and I'm sure you know this.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's Live here on GB News. Every Wednesday we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Good afternoon, Britain. It is 1 o'clock on Friday, the 9th of February.
Now, the Duke of Sussex has settled the remaining parts of his phone hacking claim against the Mirror Group newspapers. We'll be live outside the High Court to see how much cash is involved.
And my memory is fine. Those are the words of US President Joe Biden as he responded quite angrily to reporters questioning his mental agility. But in the very same press conference, he went on to confuse the president of Mexico with that of Egypt. Is the 81-year-old fit for office?
Putin blames Boris. In an interview with ex-Fox News host Tucker Carlson, Russian President Vladimir Putin hit out at an arrogant Boris Johnson, saying the former British Prime Minister was responsible for continued fighting in Ukraine, claiming he sabotaged some sort of peace deal. Has Boris' derangement system gone global? Of course, I meant to say syndrome, not system there, but you know what?
Yes, that would have made more sense in the context, but there you go. We live and learn.
Right. No, we just can't be perfect all the time.
Next time you'll absolutely nail it,
I will.
Tom.
I'll be able to read a simple word off a simple autocue.
Boris Johnson derangement syndrome. Well, do you want to explain what you mean by that?
Well, a lot of people look at problems in the United Kingdom and go, oh, it's Boris, isn't it? It's all down to Boris. And they say, oh, look at COVID and look how horrible... And actually, you look at the global rates of COVID and the UK's bumbling along somewhere in the middle. But a lot of people will think that Boris Johnson is some especially evil presence over policy.
Yes.
I mean, you look at so many issues sort of through a prism of Boris Johnson being awful.
Well, don't you remember people like Yasmin Alabai-Brown, who writes for The Guardian, I believe? She said that if Boris Johnson got into power, she'd leave the country.
And then she didn't leave the country.
I think it was her. Please let me know, Yasmin, if it wasn't you.
But it's also people who sort of put Boris and Trump in the same bracket, as if their politics is in any way similar, and it really isn't. But I think the really peculiar thing, and perhaps it isn't a Boris-specific thing, it's how Vladimir Putin and a lot of Russian commentators think Britain still has some sort of enormous global influence. It's almost acting as if Britain still had its empire.
You're talking us down.
I'm not talking us down.
Outrageous.
I just don't think that we're responsible for the war in Ukraine.
Do you at home still think there is a Boris Johnson derangement syndrome going on? There was a bit of a Trump derangement syndrome, but anyway, let's get your headlines with Sophia.
Thanks, Emily. Good afternoon. It's 1 minute past 1. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. First, some breaking news. The Duke of Sussex has settled the remaining parts of his phone hacking claim against Mirror Group newspapers. Prince Harry sued Mirror Group newspapers for damages, claiming journalists at its publications were linked to methods including phone hacking and use of private investigators for unlawful activities. 33 articles in Harry's claim were examined during the trial last year. 15 were found to have been product of unlawful information gathering. The judge also concluded Harry's phone was hacked to a modest extent by MGN, awarding him £140,000 in damages. The Prime Minister says President Vladimir Putin's accusations that the West and NATO are the cause of the Ukraine war are clearly ridiculous. In an interview with TV presenter Tucker-Carlson, the Russian president says the invasion was necessary to prevent Ukraine from posing a threat to Russia by joining NATO. Meanwhile, Putin also told Carlson that he has no interest in expanding the war or to having any dialogue with the US President Biden unless certain demands are met.
If you really want to stop fighting, you need to stop supplying weapons. It will be over within a few weeks. That's it. And then we can agree on some terms. Before you do that, stop. What's easier? Why would I call him? What should I talk to him about?
And US President Joe Biden has hit back at special counsel who described him as an elderly man with a poor memory. It comes after an investigation found he mishandled top-secret files and said he struggled to recall key life events. Biden has been accused of keeping classified national security material at home, but he won't face criminal charges. Special counsel Robert Hur said he chose not to bring criminal charges because the president cooperated and would likely have been difficult to convict. In a surprise news briefing last night, Mr. Biden insisted his memory is fine.
There's some attention paid to some language in the report about my recollection of events. There's even reference that I don't remember when my son died. How in the hell dare he raise that? Totally
How bad is your memory, and can you continue as president?
My memory is so bad I let you speak. That's
your memory has gotten worse, Mr. President?
My memory is not good. My memory is fine. My memory, take a look at what I've done since I become president.
President Joe Biden speaking there. Now, in other news, Sir Keir Starmer has blamed the Conservatives after Labour confirmed it's axing billions of pounds from its commitment to environmental issues. Sir Keir Starmer says the pledge, one of the party's flagship policies, will be scaled back to almost £24 billion instead of the original £28 billion. He says Labour has had to cut back on their warm homes plan to insulate millions of houses over the next decade. Sir Keir blamed the Tories for a very broken economy.
This government has done huge damage to our economy. Every family knows that. They've had to adjust their plans. We've now had to adjust our plans. And I think the British public appreciate us being straight and saying because of the damage that the Tories have done to the economy, we can't now do everything that we wanted to do. I'd much rather be straight with the British public than make a promise that I can't keep.
Meanwhile, the Prime Minister says the Conservatives' plan to support families is working.
I think what Labour announced yesterday just demonstrates what we've been saying, is they absolutely
don't have a plan. Their signature economic policy is in tatters, and when you don't have a plan, you can't deliver any change for the country. In contrast, our plan is working. If you look at what's happening with the economy, inflation has come down from 11% to 4%, mortgage rates are starting to come down, wages are rising, and because of that, we've been able to start cutting people's taxes.
Essex Police has confirmed the 2 dogs that fatally attacked a grandmother in Jaywick were XL bullies. 68-year-old Esther Martin was reportedly visiting her 11-year-old grandson when she was attacked on Saturday. The 2 dogs were destroyed. A 39-year-old man was arrested on suspicion of dangerous dog offences, but has been released on conditional bail until March. Junior doctors will go on strike for 5 days later this month in their long-running dispute over pay. The British Medical Association says they will walk out between the 24th of February and the 28th of February. It comes after their latest talks with the government broke down. Health Secretary Victoria Atkins criticised the move, saying the actions show the BMA aren't ready to be reasonable when it comes to a pay offer. Meanwhile, Shadow Health Secretary Wes Streeting says the responsibility lies with the Prime Minister. For the latest story, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code or on your screen, or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Tom and Emily.
Good afternoon, Britain. 8 minutes past 1, and let's start with that breaking news in the last half hour that the Duke of Sussex has settled the remaining parts of his claim against Mirror Group newspapers. That's according to his barrister, who earlier told that to the High Court.
Yes, Harry stated journalists, as its publications were linked to techniques such as phone hacking, so-called blagging, which means gaining information by deception and the use of private investigators for unlawful activities.
Well, let's speak now to Michael Cole, the former royal correspondent for the BBC. Delighted you can join us, Michael. This is likely going to mean that Mirror Group newspapers has handed a lot of money to Prince Harry, doesn't it?
Yes, and initially £400,000 in costs and other costs to be assessed later. So it's a fine day in the morning in California for the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. Vindication, victory, if you like, possibly a little celebration over breakfast time, because 15 of the 33 cases that were brought by
Oh, no, Michael
well,
Cole.
We'll see if we can re-establish connection with Michael Cole any second. But we are expecting this press conference to be starting with the legal teams and to find out precisely what has been agreed here. It has been a long time coming. This is just one of many, many pieces of litigation that Prince Harry has brought, not just against the Mirror Group newspapers, but also the publishers of the Daily Mail, associated newspapers, and even he's got court cases against the Home Office too.
I do wonder, with his short trip to London to see the King, whether there were any other meetings that took place with regards to this.
Well, that's a little bit of conspiracy theory for you. Well, perhaps. I mean, who knows? He did only have a 45-minute meeting with the King. Was here for 24 hours. A lot of other time to fill.
A few meetings with lawyers, perhaps? I don't know.
Gosh. Well, we'll get to that press conference and bring it to you live as soon as it happens. But in the meantime, the US President Joe Biden's memory is being brought into question, after a special counsel describes him as an elderly man with a poor memory.
Not what you want to be told, is it? It's after an investigation found he mishandled top-secret files and couldn't remember key life events, including being vice president. Now, Special Counsel Robert Hur says this forgetfulness would make it hard to bring criminal convictions against him, but praised the president for cooperating fully.
Well, here's President Biden confusing the presidents of Egypt and Mexico, get this, at a press conference called last night especially to explain how competent and with it he was. Take a listen.
As you know, initially, the president of Mexico, Sisi, did not want to open up the gate to allow humanitarian material to get in. I talked to him. I convinced him to open the gate. My memory is not good. My memory is fine. My memory, take a look at what I've done since I've become president. None of you thought I could pass any of the things I got passed. How'd that happen? You know, I guess I just forgot what was going on.
Well, joining us now is founding director of US politics at UCL, Thomas Gift. Thomas, thank you very much for joining us. You just watched that clip there. How much confidence is there in Joe Biden in terms of his mental agility to do the job? We're asking, is he fit for office any longer?
Well, it's great to be with you, Emily, as always. There's certainly a lot of questions around this. You know, I think questions about Joe Biden's mental acuity really started as a right-wing talking point, but it has gone mainstream, so much so that we've now seen it front and center with receipts in the special counsel investigation report. I do think that it raises really legitimate questions, and I don't think that it's necessarily news to many Americans who have been watching him for quite some time. You know, he's been bumbling over his words, he's been forgetting key facts, he's been making statements that are inaccurate or misleading. Of course, all politicians do that to some extent, but it seems particularly salient with Joe Biden. So this is a real problem for him politically.
And I suppose there's a big question in terms of what do the Democrats do about it. Clearly, this is perhaps one of the reasons why Donald Trump, a man himself under federal indictment, is leading in many polls in a head-to-head Trump versus Biden. What are the options that the Democratic Party has if they really did want to swap Biden out for someone else?
Well, the polling is certainly sobering for Joe Biden. And if you look at in key swing states, Donald Trump is leading in just about all of them. Of course, it's within the margin of error. We still have 11 months or so until the election, but this is worrying Democrats. Many progressives hope that Joe Biden will step down. They were hoping that he would do it gracefully months ago, but he's sort of insisted on going ahead. But I think that that is unlikely, and there are really two reasons. One is that Joe Biden really does think that he's the only individual who can beat Donald Trump. And, you know, to his credit, he has done it before, so he has the track record to do so. The second reason is that there's just no obvious heir apparent. We can think about some names, for example, California Governor Gavin Newsom, but he really hasn't been vetted on a national stage. Number of candidates that ran in 2020 that Joe Biden defeated, and I think defeated for a reason. You know, one of the hopes is that on the left, Michelle Obama might just parachute in and be the savior, but I really think that that is a liberal fantasy. So more and more, I think it's going to be Joe Biden versus Donald Trump, despite the fact that both of these figures are quite unpopular.
It's quite extraordinary, but even more extraordinary, actually, that the special counsel report, the Robert Hur, said his memory is so poor that it's not even worth bringing prosecution against him for mishandling national secrets, because a jury would simply take pity on him as a well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory. This is the President of the United States.
That's right. It's a very scathing report, and you can see why Joe Biden was so eager to get out in front of it. I actually think that he compounded the problem by going in front of the media and making some more missteps, which only fed into this narrative. But you're absolutely right, Emily. This isn't just a potential nominee for the presidency. This is the president right now, and I do think that it is concerning. I mean, he's got his finger on the nuclear button. But, you know, I think Republicans are certainly going to use this as ammunition. They're going to say also that a vote for Joe Biden is a vote for Kamala Harris, who's even less popular than the current president. So this is really worrying Democrats, and I think for good reason going into November. And it's certainly an issue that a lot of Democrats are quite disconcerted about.
It's so interesting you raise Kamala Harris, the vice president, because according to most polls, she perhaps is even less popular than Joe Biden. Is there any chance that the Democrat ticket might change, that Biden could still remain at the top, but a more enigmatic vice presidential candidate could be chosen and, frankly, swap in for Kamala Harris?
Well, it's amazing what a few years make, because whenever Joe Biden selected Kamala Harris back in 2020, many thought that she would be the natural successor to Joe Biden. Turns out that's not the case at all, and her estimation in the eyes of the American public has just gone down and down and down. So there's certainly a contingent within the Democratic Party that would like to see her not run with Joe Biden, but that's very difficult to do politically, because in some sense it's implicitly acknowledging acknowledging that the person that he chose in this very important role isn't up to the task. Also, there's some identity politics issues that I think make it very difficult for Joe Biden to shift away from Kamala Harris. So again, I think he's going to, dance with the girl he brung, and that's Kamala Harris in this case. And this is the ticket that the Democrats are stuck with.
Well, thank you very much indeed for your time. Thomas Gift, founding director of US politics at UCL University. I guess the question for any swing voters is whether you care more about Biden's mental decline or Trump's various legal difficulties.
Hobson's choice, isn't it?
Well, it does appear so.
Well, let's dive back into that breaking royal news in the last half hour. The Duke of Sussex has settled the remaining parts of his claim against Mirror Group newspapers. Well, according to his barrister anyway. Michael Cole, the former royal correspondent for the BBC, is back with us. And Michael, this is, you were saying, going to be a pretty bright morning in California for the couple. Lots of money heading their way.
Yeah, £400,000 initially in costs. That's what it's cost them to get this case to court. And there will be subsidiary costs afterwards. And then we come to damages. The damages we do not know. That's the punishment. In civil cases, you don't go to jail. You just pay out lots of money. And it's worth remembering that in addition to this payday, the Duke of Sussex is hoping for similar payouts from his cases, which he's taking against the publishers of the mail newspapers, that's Associated Newspapers, and the publishers of the Sun, News Corp. So these are ongoing cases. He'll have the bit between his teeth now. He's won 15 out of the 33 cases he brought. I don't know whether you heard me read the statement from the Mirror Group newspapers, but I think it's worth saying that they are a completely different company now. They're owned by a company called Reach plc, and they've made abject apologies, stressing that this all happened a long time in the past. But by and large, Emily and Tom, it's been a very good couple of days for the Prince. You see they're coming out of court after those hearings. Because last night he was in Las Vegas making a keynote speech and presenting awards the National Football League, and he made a couple of jokes which came off quite well. I'm afraid he did miss an opportunity because he had a golden chance to talk about His Majesty the King, who he just visited even hours beforehand. And had he said a few words, the Americans would have liked that and wished his father well. And also what would have gone down extremely well is if he'd sent good wishes to Kate, the Princess of Wales, because she has a great approval rating. She has a 35% approval rating in America. And her husband, Prince William, surprisingly enough, in a recent poll, forget about the contenders for the presidency, Prince William was the most popular man in the world for Americans.
Michael, why do you suspect that Prince Harry didn't take the opportunity to say such things to an American audience? Does he not care, or is he too awkward, or what is it?
I think he's badly advised, Emily. I really do think he's badly advised. There was an absolute own goal, to use a football expression in this case. I hope that's allowed. He's hired a very expensive new PR chief for Invictus Games, a Canadian who I think has got a long history in the NFL. And maybe this guy will give him some good advice because, blessed are the peacemakers because they shall inherit the earth. It's in the Bible, I think Genesis, I think. Anyway, it's there. And anybody who comes like that, and it would have played extraordinarily well to an American audience who know the King. They certainly know Prince William and Kate, and they like them. And anybody who knows anything about anything knows that the sight of two brothers fighting in any context is appalling. It's one of the worst things you can ever see. And if somebody comes and extends a hand of friendship, well, that goes down extremely well, especially at an awards evening.
Michael Cole, I can never hear the words "blessed be the peacemakers" without thinking Monty Python's "Blessed be the cheesemakers," the misheard preachings of a mosaic figure in the life of Brian. But Michael Cole, thank you so much for bringing us the very, very latest on this breaking news.
Thank you, Michael. News. It's true, isn't it, though? Why wouldn't...
What, blessed be the cheesemakers?
Well, yes, but whether he would... No, yes, no. Why wouldn't Prince Harry mention?
Yes.
Maybe he thought it wasn't the right setting.
No, I think to some extent, sometimes you compartmentalise your mind when there's.
Yeah, but why does he think he's there at this whole event, giving out these awards, making this keynote speech? It's because he's a member of the royal family.
Yeah.
It's not because of some other fantastic
I don't know. I'll have him
attribute,
find he's won an award for being a great pilot. Maybe he thinks it's all to do with that.
Well, let us know what you think. GBviews at gbnews.com.
Well, Rishi Sunak has revealed that he declined to rule out a return of the former Prime Minister Boris Johnson to Cabinet. Well, is it time to bring back Boris? We're going to be discussing, indeed debating that, after the break.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Lee Anderson's Real World. Fridays from 7 p.m.
Dr. Jane Jones, who's the clinical lead for Care After Combat.
Yeah.
Jane, thanks for coming. And just tell me a little bit about your organisation. What do you do?
OK, well, thank you for having me here so we can talk about Care After Combat. So we are an organisation, a charity, who work into the prison system, working with military veterans who've somehow got involved with the justice system and...
So there's quite a high population of ex-servicemen and women in our prisons. Why is that, do you think?
So 2014, the government did a review of who was resident in UK prisons, and what they found were that military veterans are the highest occupational group, and this obviously raises some concerns. Yeah. So the government wanted to do something about that, and so they supported Care After Combat initially, just as a scoping exercise, really, to see if there was any way we could help these men and women actually, understand the problems that led to offending behaviour and go on to lead successful lives.
So what sort of offending behaviour are we talking typically for people that's in prison that's actually served in our armed forces?
Primarily, it's violence.
Yeah.
So that is the highest offence that we work with.
Okay.
But of course, the military, as with everybody else, it's the full range of offending behaviour.
OK, so we're in a pub, Jane, Dr. Jane, and I guess for some people, the odd tip of alcohol is good, a bit of fun of a weekend, relax, let your hair down. But for some people, alcohol is not always their best friend, and I guess that plays a part in some of your veterans that end up inside.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, speaking from my own experience, a good 2/3 of the people I work with have some kind of mental health problem or mental health difficulty, struggling to either adapt into civilian life or with some of the traumas they've experienced during service. People might self-medicate with alcohol.
We're crossing live to the High Court where Harry, the Duke of Sussex's barrister, is speaking.
And indeed far worse, as the court ruled in his extremely damaging judgment. As the judge has said only this morning, we have uncovered and proved the shockingly dishonest way in which the Mirror acted for so many years and then sought to conceal the truth. In light of this, we call again for the authorities to uphold the rule of law and to prove that no one is above it. That includes Mr. Morgan, who as editor knew perfectly well what was going on as the judge held. Even his own employer realised it simply could not call him as a witness of truth at the trial. His contempt for the court's ruling and his continued attacks ever since demonstrate why it was so important to obtain a clear and detailed judgment. As I said back in December, our mission continues. I believe in the positive change it will bring for all of us. It's the very reason why I started this and why I will continue to see it through to the end. Thank you very much.
Sure, but what are the additional
Some eviscerating words for Piers Morgan there, who, of course, edited the Mirror newspaper for some years.
Yes, very much so. He said a shocking way the Mirror Group behaved and that the mission will continue. very much invested in seeing this through further. So a good day for Prince Harry.
And the first of many litigations. Of course, we were talking with Michael Cole about some of the other pieces of litigation he's bringing.
I find it very interesting how Prince Harry and, of course, his barrister framing this as a mission that will do us all good, rather than a personal.
Yes,
especially
because it's all historic and sort of we've had the whole phone hacking scandal. That is very much in the past.
It will improve all our lives. Well, there you go.
Maybe it will. Who knows? Who knows? Rishi Sunak has revealed he spoke to Boris Johnson late last year and declined to rule out a return for the former Prime Minister to Cabinet.
Yes, Science Minister Andrew Griffith said the former Prime Minister is a great voice and that the Conservatives desperately need to warn off Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer from taking power. Spokesperson for Mr Johnson declined to comment, but his team hasn't denied the conversations took place.
Well, let's speak to our political correspondent Olivia Utley in Westminster. And Olivia, we were led to believe that these two men perhaps hated each other. Is it behind the scenes slightly different?
Well, absolutely, Tom. We all were very much led to believe that they hated each other. In fact, Rishi Sunak's backstab of Boris Johnson precipitated his removal from office. But now it transpires that the two men have been talking behind the scenes. As recently as late last year, Rishi Sunak was speaking to Boris Johnson. And I thought it was fascinating the way Rishi Sunak refused to rule out a return of Boris Johnson. He said, the Prime Minister said, that he was proud of the work that he and Boris Johnson had done together. And when pressed on whether Boris Johnson may ever make a comeback, he simply said, I don't comment on personnel matters. Then we had Andrew Griffith, the Science Minister, a close ally of Boris Johnson, who worked with him in Number 10, suggesting something similar. He said that what the Conservatives need are strong voices. The interviewer then said, well, what about Boris Johnson? He's a strong voice. And Andrew Griffith agreed, saying, yes, Boris Johnson is a strong voice. It feels as though the people around Rishi Sunak at the moment are beginning perhaps to despair. We saw the resignation a couple of weeks ago of one of Rishi Sunak's advisers, Will Dry, who sent out a sort of blistering attack of the Conservatives' electoral strategy, suggesting that they're going to lose. And insider figures suggest that almost everyone, even in Rishi Sunak's closest circles, has now accepted, really, that winning the general election is all but impossible. They desperately need some sort of big voice, something to turn around their fortunes. And there are certainly those in the party who think that Boris Johnson is the answer. Interestingly, though, I just had a quick look at the Telegraph, normally thought of as a huge Boris Johnson fan paper. He was, of course, their columnist. But actually, only 55% of Telegraph readers think that Boris Johnson should make a comeback. So whether Boris Johnson is the answer to Rishi Sunak's prayers, I think, remains to be seen.
Very good. Thank you very much, Olivia Utley, our political correspondent there in Westminster for us. But joining us now is former advisor to David Cameron, Philip Blond. Philip, thank you very much for joining us. You heard Olivia Utley setting the scene there for us when it comes to Boris Johnson. Rishi Sunak refusing to rule out Boris Johnson returning to Cabinet or returning in some kind of position in the party. What do you think? Do you think it's time to bring back Boris? Is Rishi Sunak over?
Well, look, I mean, the key to having any prospects in the coming election is for the Conservative Party to hold on to their 2019 vote. So, in one sense, it makes more sense than bringing back David Cameron, which was an appeal to, a 2010 electoral coalition that no longer exists. So you can understand why people want that, and actually a sizable proportion of the party does want it, certainly in the membership, and also as a vocal minority, shall we say, in the parliamentary party. But it's really hard to see A, how it would help, and B, how it could be achieved. I imagine it would be something like, deputy chair of the party with attendance at cabinet or something like that.
It's an interesting proposition, and I suppose on the one hand we're thinking, could it be achieved? Where might he go? On the other hand, frankly, is the question, would he want it?
I doubt he would want it, because what Sunak isn't offering is anything that is really in Boris Johnson's agenda. I mean, for whatever flaws Johnson had, he at least in his vision, which the government was incapable of delivering on, of levelling up, at least spoke to the needs of the 2019 electorate, and that electorate seems to be conspicuously absent from the policy appeals, such as they are, that the government is currently making. So I think it would make the government look incoherent, and it would also sully Boris Johnson with what everyone thinks is an impending defeat of quite catastrophic proportions.
Well, Philip, I think one of the problems for Rishi Sunak is that I'm not sure there's much in the way of moral leadership, which Boris Johnson was good at talking to the nation, speaking to the British public, whether it was on foreign affairs, whether it was on domestic issues. He was strong at making a good speech that pulled on the heartstrings sometimes, could be emotive. Rishi Sunak doesn't seem to have that. The most excited and emotional I've seen him, passionate I've seen him, is when he's talking about artificial intelligence or maths to age 18. Doesn't really spur the same kind of, what's the word? Vision.
Yeah, I mean, I've been saying for a long time that the problem with Sunak's administration is it doesn't have a vision. It's a technocratic agenda. It's a managerial agenda. After sort of the chaos of Partygate and then the disaster of the trust budget, competence looked a good thing to grab hold of at that time. But the trouble is politics, competence is a necessary but not sufficient condition for winning. And there is no transformative conservative vision. I mean, what we have are a series of idiosyncratic policy offers, from smoking to maths to A-level for everybody that don't seem to present any convincing...
It's all a bit all over the place, isn't it? It's sort of freedom, then nanny state, maths, then something else.
Delaying the ban on internal combustion engines. And there's no coherence.
Higgledy-piggledy. Sorry, that's all we've got time for, Philip, but it was great to speak to you. Philip Blond, former advisor to David Cameron. Great to get your opinion on that.
Now, is Biden capable of being US president? We will be discussing all of that after your news headlines.
It's 1:33. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. The Duke of Sussex has settled the remaining parts of his phone hacking claim against Mirror Group newspapers. Prince Harry sued MGN for damages, claiming journalists at its publication were linked to methods including phone hacking and use of private investigators for unlawful activities. During the costs hearing today, his lawyer said the publisher would make an interim payment of £400,000. It follows a High Court judge's ruling in December that phone hacking by Mirror Group newspapers was carried out from 1996 to 2011 and was widespread and habitual from 1998. In a statement, the Duke of Sussex responded to the settlement, saying his mission continues as he believes it's a positive change and will bring it for all. The Prime Minister says President Vladimir Putin's accusations that the West and NATO are the cause of Ukraine war clearly ridiculous. In an interview with TV presenter Tucker Carlson, the Russian president says the invasion was necessary to prevent Ukraine from posing a threat to Russia by joining NATO. Meanwhile, Putin also told Carlson that he has no interest in expanding the war or to having any dialogue with US President Biden unless certain demands are met. US President Joe Biden has hit back at special counsel who described him as an elderly man with a poor memory. It comes after an investigation found he mishandled top-secret files and said he struggled to recall key life events. Biden has been accused of keeping classified national security material at home, but he won't face any criminal charges. And Essex Police has confirmed that 2 dogs that fatally attacked a grandmother in Jaywick were XL bullies. 68-year-old Esther Martin was reportedly visiting her 11-year-old grandson when she was attacked on Saturday. The 2 dogs were destroyed. A 39-year-old man was arrested on suspicion of dangerous dog offences, but has been released on conditional bail until March. And junior doctors will go on strike for 5 days later this month in their long-running dispute over pay. The British Medical Association says they will walk out between the 24th of February and the 28th of February. It comes after their latest talks with the government broke down. Health Secretary Victoria Atkins criticised the move, saying the actions show the BMA aren't ready to be reasonable when it comes to a pay offer. Meanwhile, Shadow Health Secretary Wes Streeting says the responsibility lies with the Prime Minister. And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
For a valuable legacy your family can own, gold coins will always shine bright. Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2606 and €1.1706. The price of gold is £1,608 and 14 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 7,606 points.
Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
I'm interested in your Royal Protocol story there about how the Queen would not be expected to visit the King more than once at the hospital or whatever. What would the benefit of that be? I'm just trying to work out why that
Well,
would be
I suppose it's to avoid lots of people outside making a big... Panicking and all the photographers. But otherwise, I think it's very strange. It's a sort of not showing your emotion, whereas Camilla will show her emotion because she loves him so much.
But any normal person would go and visit their loved ones in hospital.
Yes, they would, but you see, they never went with them, even when they went in. And only rarely would they go maybe once, if it's quite a long stay. But otherwise, they don't. They must talk on the phone. But I think this, you want to hug, you want to chat, you want all those things. And I think, good to her. I mean, she's so good. She's following all the routine.
Yes.
And what is expected of her, more so, because she's been working very, very hard the last month. And but when it comes to actually showing her caring for her husband and the King, she wants to be there with him.
And I believe he's probably expected to be continuing with his red boxes whilst he's in there, still working, but from his sick bed.
No, I don't think he can take the red boxes into hospital. I think they will be ready for him when he comes out.
Okay, so complete rest from work.
And he might have some paperwork, but I think those are so confidential that they can't be taken in. I mean, if he falls asleep and they're there, you know, you don't want to risk it. I'm sure he's got protection all the time, but I think it's not done. I don't. That's not done.
Well, he changed the location for the procedure, didn't he, so that the taxpayer didn't have to pay for 2 sets of security at 2 different hospitals.
Yes.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Well, as we've been reporting, the US President Joe Biden's memory is being brought into question again after a special counsel describes him as an elderly man with a poor memory. That's after an investigation found he mishandled top-secret files and couldn't remember key life events, including being vice president.
Is he fit to be president? That's the question we're asking our panel. We're delighted to be joined by author and writer Rebecca Reed and political commentator Alex Armstrong. Alex, let's start with you. This was a pretty excoriating report.
I think that report, what they've said about him being an elderly man with bad memory, is worse than charging him. He is clearly in total cognitive decline. To go on a press conference afterwards and say, I'm fine, raises two questions for me. One, the report said, we're letting you go because you're not fine, basically. So then to go on and say that you're fine, do you mean that actually you should be charged? And secondly, to go on and then talk about Hamas and go, oh, the president of Mexico, he's calling the president of Egypt, and then can't even figure out where it is.
On that point, shall we quickly have a little look at that clip? Let's have a look.
As you know, initially, the president of Mexico, Sisi, did not want to open up the gate to allow humanitarian material to get in. I talked to him. I convinced him to open the gate. My memory is not good. My memory is fine. My memory, take a look at what I've done since I become president. None of you thought I could pass any of the things I got passed. How'd that happen? You know, I guess I just forgot what was going on.
Mr. President. Yeah, last time I checked, President Sisi was the president of Egypt, not Mexico.
Correct. Last time I checked, Mexico wasn't bordering Gaza. Look, he's in total cognitive decline. He can't speak. He can barely walk. I mean, it asks the question, who is running the White House?
Well, Rebecca, that press conference, a bit of a mistake.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say it was decline because I think it's been consistently like this the entire time that he's been in charge. He is a very elderly man and he is clearly quite scatty. He's also particularly bad with non-English-based names. So when Rishi Sunak got in, he called him like Rashid Hanoud or something. There is an element of it being a bit like grandparents who think that all sort of slightly ethnic-sounding names are interchangeable. I'm not sure that that's, again, about dementia or decline. I think it's about the fact that he is not particularly well-versed in other languages. I don't necessarily think that this is as bad as everybody wants it to be. I think he is a perfectly viable candidate to carry on. But I don't really understand why he would want to do another term because
he doesn't know he's sick. He can't even remember when he was vice president.
I think it's very, very dangerous to say that somebody is sick without any actual knowledge of them.
The damning report just said it right here.
Yeah, but that's not a doctor.
We do have evidence of a president who was actually suffering from dementia, perhaps even his last year in the White House, and that was Ronald Reagan.
Yes, yeah. Well, look, and this is the thing, and it's kept from the public a lot of the time because the White House don't want to say we've got an elderly man that he's got his finger on the red button, he might press it by accident one day. This is going to come out way after his presidency.
Should we just be a little bit clear, just in case anyone's worried, that there isn't a physical red button?
No, we do know
that would be a bit scary.
But most people do think that's the case, and I think that is, if you're an American and you're looking at this man, he's running your country, supposedly. I don't think he is anymore.
Yeah.
He can't be.
Surely
a man who can't even remember the day his son passed away.
Okay, well, I hate the constant weaponisation of his son having died, and I don't think that's a fair or relevant thing. I think the fact that he can't remember other political things is way more relevant if you're concerned about it. My major concern here is that there is no investment from either party in who comes next. They get so caught up in their election for the immediate. There is no grassroots, who do we want next, who are we developing? And they're really, if I were to say who would replace him, it's very hard to, and I would be a Democrat, obviously, but I don't know who I would suggest. I mean, AOC seems maybe like a possibility.
Can we, to some extent, blame Hillary Clinton for this?
No.
Because the Clinton machine...
we can blame her for other things.
Because the Clinton machine... I'm being serious. The Clinton machine in 2016 wanted her to be the candidate. They swept the board clear. There was not a proper primary. You ended up having Bernie Sanders being the guy that consolidated opposition because everyone else was told, don't stand now, don't stand now. So there wasn't a proper primary. You didn't hear the multitude of voices that we saw in a big GOP primary.
Yeah, but that is nearly 10 years ago, and there's been no course correction on that. And that's true of both sides. The Republican Party have also not... like a little bit, but still consistently. If you are consistently looking at races where both the candidates are in their late 70s and 80s, you have got a real problem. And I think maybe, given that there is a lower age limit to be president, which I think is 35, maybe we should be talking about an upper age limit.
But Alex, for swing voters, though, it is a decision whether you have to weigh up in your mind as an American citizen if you're not sure who to vote. Do you care more about Biden's mental decline, which is quite obvious from what we're seeing here, or Trump's legal difficulties, let's say?
I mean, look, it's very simple. You need a leader who can make decisions. Legal problems or not, if it came down to it, swing voters are going to say, I need a man who can make decisions, whether I like he's got some convictions going on. I'm going to pick Trump every time.
What if the decisions are the wrong decisions? Shouldn't we all be taking away from this how thankful the world should be that the founders of the United States put huge limits on the power of the president,
Absolutely.
limits on the power of politicians, limits on government?
Yes, but look, when it comes down to it, the president has a lot of say in who's in charge in some of those institutions, i.e. the CIA, the revenue and customs, that sort of stuff. And so we need somebody who can make good calls.
Well, let Rebecca have the final word on this.
My concern is you're choosing between two not brilliant old men, and personally I would like the one who is the least likely to get angry and start things. And I think Biden is not perfect, but he's at least sleepy, Joe. Whereas I think, given that we're probably on the brink of about World War III, having Trump in there might be a little bit worrying.
Well, I think Biden's started more wars than Trump did in his entire term.
Well, on that note, coming up, the man awarded the Guinness World Record for creating the tallest structure ever using matchsticks says he's been on an emotional roller coaster this week. Find out why in just a few minutes.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Patrick Christie's Tonight. Weekdays from 9 p.m.
Former First Minister Nicola Sturgeon has made her much-anticipated appearance before the Scottish COVID inquiry today. It comes after allegations emerged that she deleted key pandemic WhatsApp messages, used the pandemic to push her own political agenda. But let's just cast our mind back, shall we, to August 2021, when Sturgeon was asked if she'd hand over all her WhatsApps to the inquiry. Here we go.
I think if you understand statutory public inquiries, you would know that even if I wasn't prepared to give that assurance, which for the avoidance of doubt I am, then I wouldn't have the ability. This will be a judge-led statutory public inquiry.
Which, for the avoidance of doubt, I am. OK. Well, you weren't, were you? But fast forward to today, and she was much less forthcoming.
WhatsApp messages between yourself and Mr Yusuf and Ms Lloyd were produced by you. Where did you get them?
They were provided to me through the Scottish Government.
But did you delete them?
Yes.
Did you consider yourself, against that background and your considerable ministerial experience, to be precisely the right First Minister for the job?
No, that's not how I would have thought of it at all. There's a large part of me wishes that I hadn't been.
All right, then. I'm joined now by Tory MP Lee Anderson. Lee, are those just crocodile tears?
Well, it looks like crocodile tears to me, Patrick. I mean, first we had the missing camper van. Nobody knows where that is. Now we've got this nonsense. We've got these burner phones, dodgy £5 phones from wherever they bought them from, WhatsApp messages going missing. It all looks a little bit dodgy to me. I mean, she's bleating on there, she's crying on screen. This is not cutting no ice. You know, it's crocodile tears. It makes you wonder what the SNPs are all about, Patrick. It looks... I mean, the people that have burner phones, let's be clear, people that have these dodgy phones where you can't trace them and disappearing WhatsApp messages, these are normally criminals, these are drug dealers. And you know what? These SNPs are no better than criminals.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Bonjour tout le monde, Richard Plaud, the Frenchman behind the tallest structure ever. You weren't expecting that.
You're so embarrassing, Tom. Go on.
Yeah, no, very good. Richard Plaud, I'm anglicising his name, but he is French. He's built the tallest structure ever made using matchsticks. He's been on an emotional roller coaster, he says this week. So after spending 4,200 hours building his model from more than 706,000 1,000 matches. But here's the twist. He was initially rejected by the Guinness World Records book because he had not used matches that were commercially available. Although, there's been another twist in the tale.
Yes, another twist, and I'm not sure how I feel about this. It's now been approved after what I assume was quite a lot of pressure. So we're joined now by author and writer Rebecca Reid and political commentator Alex Armstrong. Now, Rebecca, you've got a strong opinion on this. You're not quite sure if the Guinness...
No, I'm very upset. I think this is woke culture gone mad.
Go on.
I never get to say that. They have capitulated, and they originally said, these are not matchsticks, really. We've done things to them that have made them less matchsticky, and therefore not matchsticks. And I think that was quite right. And then they were like, oh, no, never mind. They're just little bits of stick now. But fine, just have it anyway.
It's because it's a wooden strike. He's taken off the actual striking bits of the match.
Just little bits of wood,
They're just
Tom.
little bits of... I mean, he might as well have built it out of toothpicks.
We can all do that, Tom. I can go in and make a wooden structure.
At all.
Rebecca, are they rewarding cheating here?
Yes, they're rewarding cheating. They're rewarding social media pressure. I think there's
but
a lot...
worst of all, they're rewarding the French.
That is, all right, the worst thing that can happen. If you can't light a cigarette with it, then it's not a match, and I don't want to hear anything about it.
Alex, what do you make of this?
I was trying to find some sort of funny quip on this, but I just can't make it up. I mean, look, it's an incredibly impressive thing for someone to do. And if he wants to spend his time building, whether it's sticks or toothpicks, I don't think people care. I think people care that it's an impressive structure he's built. He hasn't sellotaped it together, or maybe he has actually, I don't really know.
He's a cheater, so he probably did.
Maybe he did. But I think it's extremely impressive. It's beautifully detailed, and to give the man some credit, I mean, it looks beautiful.
Do we have an idea of where he got this bizarre idea from?
Probably a lack of things to do.
Maybe his wife left.
The retirement age in France is very, very low.
There you go.
And state benefits are very, very high. So maybe this is, although I don't think he's actually at retirement age, but he has spent years building this.
4,200 hours.
If he's got any children at all, then I'm angry with him.
You'd have thought that Guinness World Records would have sort of intervened earlier in the process, before it was completely finished, to say, hang on, have you checked you're using the right sort of matches?
But was he going for the Guinness World? Was he going for the record, or was that the initial reason why he did it? Because if he'd done it and gone, oh well, I'm going to submit this, you know, then maybe there's a different story there. I don't know. But if he was going for it, then yeah, probably.
No, sorry, we can't pander to people. If you want to break a record, that's on you. That's fully your responsibility. Nobody has to go around safeguarding your record attempt.
Yeah, okay.
If I try and do like most shots of tequila in a day, that's on me. I buy the tequila and I call the ambulance.
That's true. Mark McKinley, a director at Guinness World Records, said, "We're really excited to be able to approve it. We're happy to be able to admit that we were a little bit too harsh on the type of matches needed in this attempt. And Richard's attempt truly is officially amazing." Yes, what a U-turn, eh?
What a U-turn, especially after there was a bit of a media ruckus about this. It appeared in some of the papers that this man had been prevented from... I'm not sure what the previous record holder looked like. That's what I'm interested to hear. But just finally, in our final minute, Alex and Rebecca, if you were to go for a world record, what would it be? Alex first.
Oh, God, I really don't know. Probably talking or something rubbish. Like, this is what we get paid to do now. So it's like, probably talking, there we go.
The longest filibuster.
The longest filibuster. I'm sure I could do that.
And Rebecca?
Probably most feminist outrage in one day.
Amazing, amazing. Well, we look forward to employing both of those skills heartily in the programme as we go on. Yes, no, absolutely.
I think we have.
Well, of course, Alex and Rebecca will be joining us back in the next hour as well. But stay with us, of course, because we've had that breaking news that Prince Harry has settled his remaining phone hacking claim against the Mirror Group newspaper. It is one of a series of litigations he's brought, not just against newspapers, including the Mirror, the Sun, the Daily Mail, or the publishers of those, but also against the Home Office too.
Yes, and we heard from his barrister, very scathing against a certain Piers Morgan. Very much a mission that will continue, apparently. So we'll see you very shortly. Do stay with us.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good afternoon, I'm Alex Deakin. This is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. The weekends should bring most of us some sunshine, but there will still be a few showers around, and so to begin with, there'll be snow across northern Scotland, still falling here at the moment. The Met Office yellow warning in place, mostly over the hills, but some of the higher routes here pretty tricky as that snow builds up and there's a gusty wind blowing. Through central and southern Scotland and Northern Ireland, it's outbreaks of rain. The heavy showers of the day clearing from England and Wales, so many places here will be dry with clear spells through the night. Could turn a bit misty, most places staying above freezing. And actually, for a good chunk of England and Wales, it'll be a fine day tomorrow. Starts pretty dull and damp in southern Scotland, further wet weather in northern Scotland. By the end of the afternoon, the snow really confined to the tops of the hills. It'll be rain at lower levels, but still a cold wind blowing here. And through the day, showers will come into Wales and southwest England. Elsewhere, though, as I said, many places dry and bright and quite mild, actually. Double digits for many, maybe into the teens across the far south. Still pretty cold in northern Scotland. The wet weather clearing away over the Northern Isles during Sunday. There will then be plenty of showers coming in during Sunday to parts of Wales, central and southern England, and parts of western Scotland and Northern Ireland too. But some parts of the east may stay dry. Could be pretty drab though on Sunday. Mist and low clouds sticking around for much of the day, and just generally a greyer day compared to Saturday. And temperatures are touched down, but close to average for this time of year. Goodbye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
...2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
Welcome to the show. Superb stuff, great footage. So you're right in the thick of it there. What's the mood on the ground?
Well, I've left there now. I've actually now come to that EU Council summit that I was talking about. It's still pretty chaotic. The entire city of Brussels has been completely clogged with these tractors, sort of three abreast in most of the roads across the city. The people of Brussels aren't particularly happy. I mean, this is sort of reminiscent for some people of the Just Stop Oil protests, you know, people gluing themselves. People are unable to get to hospital appointments, and there's a lot of upset about the destruction that's happening on the streets of Brussels today. But on the other side, there's also the protests, which the farmers are saying that EU green laws simply are not able to fit with what they need to do to keep their businesses going. And just before the protests happened, we saw the European Commission actually make some concessions to the farmers' protests. And this is on the demands that were put on them to set aside somewhere in the region of 5% of their land for regrowing for biodiversity. A lot of the farmers have said that's not possible, and the European Commission has said that they can delay that coming in. So they have won a small concession with these protests.
And Jack, there's a feeling as well, a huge dissatisfaction that the European Union has managed to find 50 billion euros in aid to send to Ukraine, and yet farmers in particular are on the receiving end of net zero targets, taxation on diesel, and endless red tape. So many farmers, Jack, saying they're measuring ditches to see if they have to drain them or not. There are minimum requirements on the width of battery hen enclosures. Endless red tape, as Jeremy Clarkson pointed out in Clarkson's farm in Britain. They've simply had enough, and they're shouting, Ursula von der Leyen, we are here.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 2 o'clock on Friday, the 9th of February.
Yes, my memory is fine. Those were the words of US President Joe Biden as he responded quite angrily to reporters questioning his mental agility. But in the very same press conference, he did go on to confuse the president of Mexico with that of Egypt. Is the 81-year-old fit for office?
Putin blames Boris. In an interview with the ex-Fox News host Tucker-Carlson, Vladimir Putin hit out at an arrogant Boris Johnson, saying the former British Prime Minister was responsible for continued fighting in Ukraine, claiming he sabotaged a peace deal. Has Boris derangement syndrome gone global?
And running out of options, Parkrun, a nationwide running event which includes athletes, has removed all gender and age records from its website. Some trans women athletes were holding the fastest times in the female category on some courses. We'll hear straight from a former Olympian. If you're wondering what happens in the breaks sometimes, Tom Harwood likes to indulge in a bit of singing.
I don't necessarily sing. I know all of the words to Hamilton, or at least the first song of that. I got you to see Operation Mincemeat recently.
You did.
You and Patrick went, and it was brilliant.
I did enjoy it very much. It was a lot of fun. It was. And if you're watching, there was a lovely GB News viewer there who said hello. So if you're watching, hello.
Anyway, back to our jobs. Yes, we will be discussing a little bit about that Putin interview, because to some extent people have been saying, well, this is the first time that he's been interviewed by a Western journalist since the invasion of Ukraine. It's important. On the other hand, though, it was a totally sycophantic interview where not only did Putin spend the first hour waffling on about his warped view of Russian history with barely any interruption, he seemed to have all these softball questions.
Yes, it was as though Putin certainly was leading the interview. Tucker-Carlson couldn't get a word in edgeways at times, at least for the first half.
I think that this is a good lesson for British politicians. Can you imagine Rishi Sunak sitting there, perhaps being interviewed by our very own Christopher Hope, and Christopher Hope says, Rishi, what are you going to do to stop the boats? And then Sunak just turns to him and says, well, you have to remember in 1066, when the Normans invaded, no, you're going to let me finish, I'm going to go through every single, because of course we had Danelaw across part of the country, and actually if we go back a little further, the Anglo-Saxons and Jutes came across in small boats. So really, unless we look at it with the Roman context, I don't see that you can answer.
I think in this case, Tucker-Carlson may not have wished to interrupt Vladimir Putin too much for various fears.
I wonder how many KGB officers were standing behind Putin, perhaps pointing Kalashnikovs his way.
Well, let us know what you think, because I know there's a lot of different views on this subject, so let us know, gbviews@gbnews.com. But it's your headlines with Sophia now.
Thanks, Emily. Good afternoon. It's 3 minutes past 2. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. Your top story this hour, the Duke of Sussex has settled the remaining parts of his phone hacking claim against Mirror Group newspapers. Prince Harry sued MGN for damages, claiming journalists at its publication were linked to methods including phone hacking and use of private investigators for unlawful activities. During the case hearing today, his lawyer said the publisher would make an interim payment of £400,000. It follows a High Court judge's ruling in December that phone hacking by Mirror Group newspapers was carried out from 1996 to 2011 and was widespread and habitual from 1998. In a statement, the Duke of Sussex responded to the settlement results, saying his mission continues as he believes in positive change it will bring for us all. The Prime Minister says President Vladimir Putin's accusations that the West and NATO are the cause of the Ukraine war are clearly ridiculous. In an interview with TV presenter Tucker-Carlson, the Russian president says the invasion was necessary to prevent Ukraine from posing a threat to Russia by joining NATO. Meanwhile, Putin also told Carlson that he has no interest in expanding the war or to having any dialogue with US President Biden unless certain demands are met.
If you really want to stop fighting, you need to stop supplying weapons. It will be over within a few weeks. That's it. And then we can agree on some terms. Before you do that, stop. What's easier? Why would I call him? What should I talk to him about?
US President Joe Biden has hit back at special counsel who described him as an elderly man with a poor memory. It comes after an investigation found he mishandled top-secret files and said he struggled to recall key life events. Biden has been accused of keeping classified national security material at home, but he won't face criminal charges. Special counsel Robert Hur said he chose not to bring criminal charges because the president cooperated and would likely be difficult to convict. In a surprise news briefing last night, Mr. Biden insisted his memory is fine.
I know there's some attention paid to some language in the report about my recollection of events. There's even reference that I don't remember when my son died. How in the hell dare he raise that? Totally
How bad is your memory, and can you continue as president?
My memory is so bad I let you speak. That's
your memory has gotten worse, Mr. President?
My memory has not gotten. My memory is fine. My memory. Take a look at what I've done since I've become president.
President Joe Biden speaking there. Now, Sir Keir Starmer says Labour has had to slash their green promises after the economy has been damaged by the Conservatives. Labour's promise to borrow £218 billion a year to turn Britain green has been scaled back to approximately £2.6 billion. The goal of the Warm Homes Plan is to insulate millions of houses over the next decade. Sir Keir blamed the U-turn of the flagship climate proposal on the Tories, saying the original proposal was drafted when interest rates were affordable.
This government has done huge damage to our economy. Every family knows that. They've had to adjust their plans. We've now had to adjust our plans. And I think the British public appreciate us being straight and saying because of the damage that the Tories have done to the economy, we can't now do everything that we wanted to do. I'd much rather be straight with the British public than make a promise that I can't keep.
Meanwhile, the Prime Minister says the Conservatives' plan to support families is working.
I think what Labour announced yesterday just demonstrates what we've been saying, is they absolutely don't have a plan. Their signature economic policy is in tatters, and when you don't have a plan, you can't deliver any change for the country. In contrast, our plan is working. If you look at what's happening with the economy, inflation has come down from 11% to 4%, mortgage rates are starting to come down, wages are rising, and because of that, we've been able to start cutting people's taxes.
In other news, Essex police has confirmed that 2 dogs that fatally attacked a grandmother in Jaywick were XL bullies. 68-year-old Esther Martin was reportedly visiting her 11-year-old grandson when she was attacked on Saturday. The 2 dogs were destroyed. A 39-year-old man was arrested on suspicion of dangerous dog offences but has been released on conditional bail until March. And junior doctors will go on strike for 5 days later this month in their long-running dispute over pay. The British Medical Association says they will walk out between the 24th and 28th of February. It comes after their latest talks with the government broke down. Health Secretary Victoria Atkins criticised the move, saying the actions show the BMA aren't ready to be reasonable when it comes to a pay offer. Meanwhile, Shadow Health Secretary Wes Streeting says the responsibility lies with the Prime Minister. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Tom and Emily.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 8 minutes past 2, and the US President Joe Biden's memory is being brought into question after a special counsel described him as an elderly man with a poor memory.
And it's after an investigation found he mishandled top-secret files and couldn't remember key life events, including his vice presidency. Special counsel Robert Hur says this forgetfulness would make it hard to bring criminal convictions, but he praised the president for cooperating fully.
Here's what President Biden said, confusing the presidents of Egypt and Mexico at a press conference last night, the same press conference he called to showcase his mental agility.
As you know, initially, the president of Mexico, Sisi, did not want to open up the gate to allow humanitarian material to get in. I talked to him. I convinced him to open the gate. My memory is not good. My memory is fine. My memory, take a look at what I've done since I've become president. None of you thought I could pass any of the things I got passed. How'd that happen? You know, I guess I just forgot what was going on.
Well, there you go. That's what President Biden had to say. But joining us now is political psychologist Dr. Jan Halper-Hayes. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, Jan, on the show. Now, to begin with, the idea that Joe Biden was suffering mentally in his capacity in one way or another, was seen as a bit of a right-wing talking point. Is it now undeniable that there are issues here?
Yes, it is undeniable, but it has been undeniable from day one, even during the campaigning of his. We knew that he was suffering from dementia, but we also knew he had a lot of support. Sometimes what's also very important is who you pick to be within your cabinet to make sure that you've got the right kind of support and the right kind of brain power making decisions and, you know, maybe holding you up a bit. And he's been held up quite a bit.
Now, Dr. Harper-Hayes, I know that you're a supporter of Donald Trump's, but I suppose we have to ask the question of both of these candidates, both men in their 80s, both individuals who've made recent slip-ups. We've highlighted, of course, President Biden getting confused between the President of Mexico and the President of Egypt, but Trump himself only a couple of months ago said that Viktor Orban was the leader of Turkey, when, of course, Viktor Orban is the leader of Hungary. Does Trump not make these same sort of slip-ups? Could the same sort of points of age and perhaps memory loss not be pointed in both directions?
I should say he is 77 last time I checked.
He'll
Donald
be 80
Trump.
by the end of the presidency.
Thank you for getting the facts right. I like that. All right, look, age is been coming into it. On one hand, saying Trump did this slip up, and do we want to put a list together of how many slip-ups that Biden has had versus how many that Trump has had? But there's also something else to be aware of about Trump, because he will give at his rallies, purposely, he will make quote-unquote mistakes. Part of it is to bait the mainstream media so that they'll jump on that. It's kind of a deflection. So he might have said 5 years and then 10 minutes later might have said 7 years. So the other thing is that who has the stamina, the perseverance, the intellect? And one of the things that we're talking age, we talk, should we have someone younger? Should someone be more vital? What we have been brainwashed to look at is the charismatic, the superficial, and the flaws. And I think part of that has been so that we will not hold our politicians accountable, because if we're only looking at them superficially, then where is the real criticism of whether they understood what their constituents, what their voters wanted and needed, versus they were giving empty promises and never delivering?
Jan, some will say he's got a big team behind him. Memory doesn't matter too much. It's all about political judgment.
Well, you don't want me to get into the whole cabinet and their political judgment, which I don't think has been the best for our country overall. And setting aside whatever my alliance and my support and my belief in Trump is, I wrote an article and drjan.substack.com, and it is looking at how we have been brainwashed to think superficially instead of what the critical issues are. We want someone who has resilience. We do not need someone who's doing a press conference and we end up seeing the cheat sheets that the president is holding in his hands as Biden has been photographed and broadcast so many times. And then he has to look at it as to who he's supposed to call on. And look, we knew that he wasn't fully there mentally. But what we were more concerned about was, would his administration make the right decisions on behalf of the American people?
Dr. Jan, I've seen Trump having cheat sheets in his hands. There was a famous one that was photographed when he was meeting with some shooting survivors. It had 5 points written in very large text on it, saying things like, be empathetic. Both of these men, perhaps, have these issues. And I wonder, is this perhaps something that was brought up in the Republican primary? After all, Governor Ron DeSantis launched a website charting all of the sort of hiccups and mistakes that Donald Trump made when he misspoke and misnamed people. All I'm saying is that these are two individuals who've both had these sort of accusations levelled at them. OK, are we going to stay on the superficial about this? Because have you never slipped up in what you're saying? I know I have. I know, and I'm a lot younger than them. Well, maybe not that much younger, but I'm younger than them. It happens to the best. It happens to the best of us. But is that really the critical issue that we should be looking at going forward? You know, one of the things I was listening to Emily and the other gentleman, and one of the things that bothered me in what she said was that we've got two old people, and, you know, one is more, I'd rather have him because he's more of a space, this is not verbatim, but more of a space cadet because he won't get us into a war and thinks Trump will. But how many people, when he was running in 2016, said he's going to get us into a war, and he's the only president in 40 years that hasn't gotten us into a war? So we have to also not hold on to those false things, and we need to look at the actions, the behavior. Biden said, oh, I'm going to do unity. I'm going to bring this country together. Well, look, you can't blame him for the divisiveness. You can't blame Trump for the divisiveness. The divisiveness has been going on since Newt Gingrich came in, and that was one of his strategies. It's been going on for decades. So again, if we focus on that versus what has someone done, do they hear what the people need? Is that the right person? Are they coming up with the right policies, and have they put the right people in to execute on that? And that's what we're looking at.
Well, thank you very much indeed for your time. It's great to talk to you. Political psychologist Dr. Jan Halper-Hayes. Really good to speak to you. I think that is a good point just in general about our politics, that there is a push to focus on superficial points.
And very, very right to bring up the 1994 Republican Revolution, when Newt Gingrich finally switched the House from being forever Democrat to being Republican-controlled. The way he did that was relentless political messaging and a greater sense of partisanship, of political divide.
Well, the manhunt for chemical attack suspect Abdul Azadi has entered its 10th day, believe it or not.
Last night, armed police searched 2 addresses, including his place of work in Newcastle. No arrests were made, and the search continues.
Yes, the 35-year-old suspect was last seen near London's Vauxhall Bridge, just moments after allegedly carrying out that attack.
Well, joining us now is our reporter Theo Chikomba from New Scotland Yard. And Theo, we have been having these new bits of CCTV drip-fed to us, but it seems like the police are no closer to catching the criminal.
Yes, well, for now, we are into the 10th day of this nationwide manhunt following the suspected chemical attack last week, Wednesday, in Clapham. Now, of course, the police have been working this week alongside a number of other forces. We've seen CCTV footage released over the days looking to map out his whereabouts. And he was last seen, Abdul Azadi was last seen crossing the Chelsea Bridge, going into the Battersea Park area, and then coming back out, heading towards Chelsea Bridge. And the last sighting was at 11:27 last week, Wednesday evening. Now, we have seen some reports from some media outlets this afternoon saying the police believe he may have gone into the river, but that is just one of many theories. As we already know, there are hospitals which are on high alert, and ports as well. And there are, of course, appeals for anyone in the community who who may be hiding him. So there are a number of theories being looked into by the Metropolitan Police. But as you rightly mentioned, this week the Metropolitan Police and Northumbria Police carried out an armed raid at some premises associated with Abdul Ezedi, and this included a pizza takeaway where he worked. Now, just in other news, we still understand that the 31-year-old woman who was attacked with her two children remains in hospital, but she's been too ill to speak to the police, so we have not heard from her at the moment. As for the children, they did suffer injuries, but they're not as bad as they were feared initially. Now, the police have been giving out drip feeding this CCTV footage over the last couple of days, and it's unclear whether someone is hiding him or whether he's been doing so to kind of maybe show the police that he's trying to do other movements and maybe throw them off slightly, but that remains unclear at the moment. But what is remaining is that £20,000 reward if anyone has any information leading to the arrest of Abdul Ezedi. That remains in place as those investigations continue.
Very much indeed. Theo Jacombo, our reporter there from outside News Scotland Yard. How awful that the victim in this attack, the woman, is in hospital still and unable to speak.
Yeah, and it is such a shame that we've focused so much on Abdul Ezedi and quite rightly on how he got to this country, why, frankly, he was given asylum. But we do need to spend time thinking about the victim as well in all of this. After all, it's her life that will be most changed.
Well, it's horrifying. But coming up, we will speak to a long-distance runner and two-time Olympian as the weekly running event Parkrun has removed all gender from its website amid a row over transgender athletes holding the fastest times. We'll have more on that very shortly.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's Live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Farage, Monday to Thursday from 7 p.m.
Lots of people have different ideas, but principally a conservative approach to getting growth is to reduce taxes so that people, ordinary people and businesses can spend more of their own money to invest and grow the economy.
So the theory is that you cut taxes and that then pumps more money into the economy.
Exactly right.
Growth.
And then people, it's not government that are creating wealth. It's individuals, businessmen, companies that create wealth. It's the private sector that creates wealth, that the public sector then taxes and spends.
I get the theory, but one of the criticisms of you, and I think one of the criticisms actually of all political parties, is they appear to be incapable of cutting government spending.
That's the key. I mean, and I think when I look back, is that we should have had a credible plan to reduce the increase in spending. Now, that's often a difficult concept to explain.
But it's in line with inflation, etc.
That's all right. So when you're slowing the increase, it means, one year you spend £100 and the next year you spend maybe £101 as opposed to going up to £110. So the actual level isn't going down, but you're slowing the increase. And that's very much what I tried to do. And actually, looking back, the one thing I wish I'd done, was to present a credible spending plan at the same time as the tax cuts that we announced.
You had a go, it didn't work out for whatever reason, and that analysis will go on for some years to come. We have Jeremy Hunt there as Chancellor now, hinting quite strongly now there won't be any tax cuts, but the truth of it is, under 14 years of Conservatives, for a variety of reasons, the tax burden has risen to the highest since the Attlee government way back in
80 years,
1951, whatever it is.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together. For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It is 2:24, and we've got lots more coming up for you in the show today. In the next few minutes, we'll be asking if Parkrun is running out of ideas.
Very good.
As they deal with ongoing issues surrounding transgender inclusion and women winning in the female category.
But first, in a new GB News series, Innovation Britain, we're looking at the success of British manufacturing around the country.
One of the biggest issues we're facing today in the manufacturing and engineering sectors is the fact that there's a skills shortage and a skills gap. But there's companies out there like this one that are doing something about it. So, Paul, what's happening here?
Well, here at Income Training, we deliver engineering and manufacturing apprenticeships. So we start people in their engineering career, like the people we see behind us today. And this year we've had our biggest intake ever of people going into engineering and manufacturing on an apprenticeship to shape their future.
So how did we get into this situation in the first place?
It's a result of generations of people not coming into the sector. We're trying to do something about that. We're trying to show everyone that engineering manufacture is a great career and apprenticeship is a great route into that career.
And how are you doing this?
What we're doing at Income is inspiring young people to come into the sector. There's loads of companies, big and small, within the UK, and these people are, whether they want to use their brain or use their hands, they're going into careers that'll last them a lifetime.
And it's not just apprenticeships, is it?
It's not, no. So we are bridging skills gaps through a variety of programmes. Last year we launched the first ever UK Tooling Academy in partnership with Grandhour, a Birmingham-based company, and that's for bringing in people who are already engineers to go from here to here through our full-time programme.
But you're also upskilling too, aren't you?
We are. We launched the UK's first ever Tooling Academy at our other site. That is about upskilling existing engineers in the tooling sector to go from here to here through a 20-week full-time programme.
Well, there you go, Innovation Britain, good stuff.
Yeah, I'd love to see innovation in Britain.
We do. Now, is Parkrun running out of ideas? This is to deal with their ongoing issues surrounding a campaign because trans women were winning in the female category in some courses. Now, the organisation has decided now to remove data and not track the top finishers. So Parkrun argue this will make their free weekly running events more inclusive. But is there more to this?
Joining us now is the long-distance runner and former Olympian, Mara Yamauchiki. Thank you so much for joining us here on Good Afternoon Britain. I suppose, on the one hand, lots of people are saying this is to do with trans inclusion. Parkrun haven't said that. Parkrun say that putting all of these times on the website were off-putting for new competitors. But you think they're not telling the whole truth?
Well, there are two things going on here. Parkrun has always said it's not a race, but they have all the trappings of a race. They have a start and finish line, timing, measured course, everybody sets off together, results in descending order of speed, etc., plus all these first finisher lists and so on. So what they've done is remove all this data, and that goes some way to proving that they are not a race, although we're told that they will retain results in descending order of speed, they'll still have a measured course and so on. But separately is the gender self-ID issue. Parkrun they have gender self-ID, not sex, for categories. That means any male is welcome to join the female category, and many have and still are. And that is unfair for females because males run on average 10% or more faster than females. So the consequence of this policy is things like, until all the data was wiped on Wednesday, at one point, 22 female records, that is outright plus age group records, were held by males. On more than 150 occasions, males have finished as first female. And this is obviously unfair for females because we're missing out on things of value. And I and others have been speaking up about it because we want fairness in the same way that males get at Parkrun. But Parkrun have not really addressed that issue. Their gender self-ID policy continues. Males are welcome in the female category. So the impact of that going forward will simply be hidden, I think, because all this data has been removed.
Yes, I know, Mara, because a lot of people, the parkrun is supposed to be a fun activity at the weekend to do. But for a lot of people, it is a competitive exercise. Half of the enjoyment is seeing how you rank compared to other people on that day, compared to your female counterparts. In my case, I've done it a couple of times, 2 or 3 times. I've done a parkrun, and I love seeing the stats there. Now, Parkrun, as Tom said, Parkrun are saying this has nothing to do with the issue of transgender inclusion in the female category. But it sounds as though they've been faced with this campaign from some females who say, hang on, trans women shouldn't be competing in the female category. And they've now taken this ridiculous decision to just scrap the stats from the website. That doesn't solve the problem, does it?
I think the beauty of Parkrun and why it's been so successful and much loved is that it caters for everybody. It caters for runners who don't want to exert themselves. They just want to jog around and chat with their friends, and that is absolutely fine if they want to do that. I'm not criticising people who want to do that at all. It also catered for competitive people who may be at or near the front, or maybe in the middle or even towards the back of the field. Like, you know, older runners, if they're giving it 100%, they might be running in a slow time, but for them it's still competitive, and the age group records and so on would have meant a lot. Now, by removing all that data, they've made it less appealing to the competitive runners. And what I think they could have done, and perhaps should have done, is change their categories to sex at birth. This would have made everybody welcome, included, and it would have been fair for everybody, including females, and kept all their data. There is still the issue of it's not a race.
It would be strange to see trans women, perhaps who've been through hormone replacement therapy, perhaps who've changed a lot about the way that they live their lives, and to put them in the same category as men because that's their sex at birth. That doesn't sound particularly inclusive. Is there perhaps another way that they could have handled this?
There already exist 2 extra categories in Parkrun. One is called Another Gender Identity, and another is called Prefer Not to Say. So trans people and trans women are welcome and included. Nobody is stopping them. Nobody is telling them they're not welcome. They must be included. But trans women are biologically male. This is extremely important because your running ability is determined by your sex. How you identify, whether you have long hair, like to wear a dress, lipstick, whatever, is completely irrelevant. What matters is your sex. So
also, in this case, if there's already a 3rd and a 4th category, then why on earth have Parkrun decided to do this? I mean, it boggles the mind. I'm really sorry, but that's all we've got time for, Mara. But it was great to speak to you, and good luck with it. Mara Yamauchi, former Olympian and long-distance runner. I just don't understand why Parkrun have done this, Tom. It makes absolutely no sense at all. Half of the fun is the competitive aspect.
Yeah, you know, you'd think that more categories might be a more balanced solution than getting rid of them altogether. But coming up, Putin blames Johnson for sabotaging the Russia and Ukraine peace deal in a Tucker-Carlson interview that's been described as 2 hours of unchecked propaganda. We'll be dissecting that interview with our panel, plus much more, so stay with us.
Tom, Emily, thank you. It's 2:33 from the GB Newsroom. Your headlines. The Duke of Sussex has settled the remaining parts of his phone hacking claim against Mirror Group newspapers. Prince Harry sued MGN for damages, claiming journalists at its publication were linked to methods including phone hacking and use of private investigators for unlawful activities. During the costs hearing today, his lawyer said publishers would make an interim payment of £400,000. In a statement, the Duke of Sussex responded to the settlement results, saying his mission continues, as he believes in the positive change it will bring for us all. The Prime Minister says President Vladimir Putin's accusations that the West and NATO are the cause of Ukraine war are clearly ridiculous. In an interview with TV presenter Tucker-Carlson, the Russian president says the invasion was necessary to prevent Ukraine from posing a threat to Russia by joining NATO. Meanwhile, Putin also told Carlson that he has no interest in expanding the war or to have any dialogue with the US President Biden unless certain demands are met. And US President Joe Biden has hit back at special counsel who described him as an elderly man with a poor memory. It comes after an investigation found he mishandled top-secret files and said he struggled to recall key life events. Biden has been accused of keeping classified national security material at home, but he won't face criminal charges. Essex Police has confirmed that 2 dogs that fatally attacked a grandmother in Jaywick were XL bullies. 68-year-old Esther Martin was reportedly visiting her 11-year-old grandson when she was attacked on Saturday. The 2 dogs were destroyed. A 39-year-old man was arrested on suspicion of dangerous dog offences but has been released on conditional bail until March. And junior doctors will go on strike for 5 days later this month in their long-running dispute over pay. The British Medical Association says they will walk out between the 24th and 28th of February. It comes after their latest talks with the government broke down. Health Secretary Victoria Atkins criticised the move, saying the action shows the BMA aren't ready to be responsible when it comes to a pay offer. Meanwhile, Shadow Health Secretary Wes Streeting says the responsibility lies with the Prime Minister. And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Britain's newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
When you listen to Nigel Farage's assessment there, do you feel that maybe this is as good as it was going to get, given that we had the pandemic and it was inevitably always going to be a bit of a mixed bag?
Well, I think it's a bit of a poor excuse from Nigel there that they haven't done it properly. The facts are, Nigel, that it's not worked. It's not going to work. Yes, we will rejoin. I mean, are we better off for it? Are they...
Can I jump in there, Charlie? We're going to rejoin under which government? Because Labour aren't going to do that, unless you don't think...
But I mean, it's going to be unavoidable not to join, because I think it's getting worse and worse for us. I mean, let me just say this. Are the NHS better because we're out of Europe? No, they're not, because they're not employing more staff. Is the building trade better off? No. Is travelling abroad or to the EU or staying in the EU, are we better off? No. Are we better off because foods rise because of the EU? No. Are we better off with imports and export? No, because they're taking longer. The overall result is that we're not better off. The killer point here is 57% of the public would now vote to remain. 33% would leave. Surely that's the telling point.
It depends on the pollster, Charlie, because we were talking to a very good pollster earlier who said there's no enthusiasm for any change in a year. Maybe 10 years, they might be thinking about it.
Belinda de Lucia, let's bring you in. I'm sure you want to react to what Charlie said.
I mean, who would have thought that the UK wanting to run its own affairs and making our politicians more accountable would be so revolutionary? EU Parliament voted a majority to get rid of the vetoes, the last remaining scraps of democracy that the EU had. Now, luckily for EU citizens at the moment, you know, it means a treaty change to actually go forward. But that is the mood. The ever closer union. We have dodged a federalised, globalist, international, power-gobbling, anti-democratic organisation, and that's worth more than a few trade and travel perks for a few wealthy people in this country.
Hear, hear. Belinda de Lucia, Charlie Mullins, great to see you both.
I'm Andrew Doyle.
Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, as we've been discussing, Vladimir Putin sat down for the first time with a Western media outlet since his full-scale invasion of Ukraine, as the much-anticipated interview hosted by Tucker-Carlson was released in full last night.
Yes, during the, get this, 2-hour and 7-minute-long interview recorded in Moscow, Putin once again denied Ukraine's existence as a sovereign state, as well as blaming the West for NATO, and NATO as the cause of the war in Ukraine.
The Russian president also blamed former Prime Minister Boris Johnson for sabotaging a potential peace deal. So let's welcome back our panel, author and writer Rebecca Reed and political commentator Alex Armstrong. Thank you for coming back to our panel. So what do we make of this? Let's go with the Boris Johnson line here, Alex, blaming Boris Johnson for sabotaging a peace deal.
Well, this is based on the fact that he flew over during the negotiation period between Zelensky and Putin, and then supposedly once he'd arrived, it all fell apart. Now, there's no one backing up this claim other than Putin, so let's just be clear about that for a second. Would Boris really want to scupper a deal? Did America really want to get into this war? I think that's the question that he's posing here. He's blaming the states for escalating this and saying we could have had a deal done. But frankly, if Boris turned up and said, look, don't give up your land to this man who's just invaded your country and we will back you and support you, I would go, fantastic news. We should fight for our country. So if that was what Boris did, then I'm all for it. It's remarkable that Vladimir Putin thinks Boris Johnson has such sway over global affairs. I see regularly sort of Russian talk show, debate show. I say debate show. They're not debate shows. Everyone agrees with one another. And they all sort of talk about Liz Truss and Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak as if we're somehow controlling the world. I mean,
we have got great soft
power.
We have got great soft power.
I do think Britain is a great country, but I mean, I wish I had the confidence in Britain as a superpower that Vladimir Putin clearly does.
But I think also your average viewer for that show has an understanding that the power in charge of a country is always a superpower. So that I suppose they assume that our leader is our leader with a capital L, who we don't question, which is not necessarily the case. I think we do a very good... One thing we are good at in this country is questioning our leaders.
And getting rid of them.
And getting rid of them. Like a Big Brother
Do you think
format.
Tucker Carlson was right to do this interview?
I mean, in terms of his own profile and getting some eyeballs on his quite boring show, absolutely. If I were Tucker Carlson, I would have done it. But then, you know, that's just brutal money making. In terms of, like, you know, actual broadcasting, no, of course not. It was ghastly. And I think it would be very brave to have done a really confrontational interview where every single thing he said that was inaccurate was challenged. But A, I'd be a bit worried about what might happen to me after that. And B, that's not what Tucker Carlson does. Tucker Carlson wants a narrative that feels comfortable to him. And things like Ukraine is full of Nazis, which is one of the things that he said in the interview. Putin, not Tucker, that feeds into the kind of obsessive person who watches this show and feels like and believes in conspiracy theories.
Quite a few people have been getting in touch today, though, in the GB Views inbox to say that they're, well, supportive of this interview.
Yeah, and they absolutely should be. Look, if we're in favour of freedom of speech, we should, well, first of all, we should listen to our enemies. We should hear their opinions and try to understand them. That is an advantage for us in a war, particularly a war of propaganda. We now know what Putin's objectives are with his own people in terms of trying to brainwash them into saying this is what you should believe. Ukraine is part of Russia. It's not its own independence. So these are great things for us to understand about him. And those who watch Tucker Carlson will know his line of interviewing is very, very much the same for most of the people he does interview. So there won't be any surprises for his regular viewers. And look, frankly, we should...
But he doesn't usually let them speak for about half an hour about...
No, that's true. Well, that's true.
26 minutes uninterrupted.
I mean, look, I think if you're going to interview Putin, there's certainly going to be an element of why was he allowed to interview him? There would have been some set, agreed principles for that interview.
But isn't that where the theory breaks down? Like, absolutely, I agree that freedom of speech is important. And also, I think the more that you demystify scary figures like Putin, the better you do. However, this was not an interview where he went, this is inaccurate, this isn't true, are you sure about this, why did you do this? He just handed him a microphone.
But I do think the audience are capable of seeing the nuance
Tucker Carlson's
there.
audience.
Well, I think everyone who's watching, and maybe aren't just Tucker Carlson viewers, they're
I mean,
able
let's
to see
remember
through the
Tucker Carlson.
propaganda. They've got
True.
Google, they've got the access to ChatGPT.
We have to remember
Oracle
Tucker
of all
Carlson
truth.
had the most popular show on Fox News. He had about 3 million nightly viewers of his show, and then, of course, there's all the social media. A huge...
worryingly huge following. But I think when you move from a legitimate news source like Fox, stuck in my throat a bit, to a platform like YouTube, you only take the most extreme faction with you. So anybody who just had the TV on because it was on or because their parents used to watch Fox, you don't get them. You get the people who really feel that they are not represented in other media. And therefore, particularly if you look at the comments and the discourse around Tucker Carlson online, it is the most extreme people who really do believe some extraordinary things, who are unlikely to then go and do the Google they need to do to check whether what Putin said was true or not.
This is all predicated upon the idea that people watched more than about 30 seconds of this without getting very, very bored. I tried to watch it. I mean, there's an hour of just Russian history. 20 minutes or so uninterrupted. Tucker tries to get something in, and then Putin's like, no, we're talking about Russian history. He's so super... I thought Tucker Carlson was supposed to be this big Bolshevik media personality. He's so supine. He lets Putin ride all over him. And more than that, he lets Putin make jokes about him, about how he couldn't get into the CIA and all the rest of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fascinating interview either way, right? Whatever way you want to look at it, we've understood something about Tucker Carlson and we've understood something about Putin. So I think it's been very exposing for the both of them. The history is so utterly boring for 30 minutes.
Now
it really is.
Putin obviously did mention Boris Johnson. Is it time to bring him back? This is because reports suggest Rishi Sunak considered this last year, whilst Putin, of course, as we said, blamed the former Prime Minister for sabotaging a peace deal. We'll be back in a tick.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's Live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
The Camilla Tominey Show, Sunday mornings from 9:30.
Questions to be answered, and there seemed to be a significant amount, does once again point its way to a public inquiry into exactly what happened in this case. Starmer's called for that. Would you call for that too?
I certainly think that first of all, there's one thing that's happening now. The NHS have to order an independent inquiry. That's been done. So they've got to look at all the whys and wherefores of what happened with this man. If it appears that we're not getting sufficient depth and breadth to this, then I think having an inquiry with all the powers that brings would be extremely advantageous. What I don't want is some long-winded inquiry that will take years, by which time other people will have been put at risk and maybe other lives have lost. We know what the problems are here, Camilla. Law's been passed on this. This is all about making sure on the ground we implement the highest degree of monitoring in order to ensure the safety of the public.
Has care in the community failed? I mean, it seems oxymoronic to say that it's care in the community in this case. We know that the number of psychiatric care beds has been slashed from 52,000 back in 2001 to 24,000 now. I've anecdotally, because I wrote my column about this in The Telegraph yesterday, received quite a lot of correspondence from people saying the situation with care in the community is dire. People aren't being adequately monitored. Was it a mistake to close down all of those mental institutions?
I don't think we should go back to those days when we had those appalling institutions where we just lock people away and forget about them, and not just mental health people, but autistic people and disabled people. Horrific way to treat individuals, and you know I campaign on that a lot.
I know.
However, I think if we move into a more community-based approach, which can be really good for many, many people who are on the spectrum and on that scale of mental health, we have to remember there will be a small but significant number who will continue to pose a danger. And that's why monitoring is so important.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews at gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's coming up to 10 minutes to 3. And now for the big question. Should Boris Johnson come back into government? We're now joined by the author and writer Rebecca Reid and political commentator Alex Armstrong. Rebecca, let's start with you. Rishi's in the doldrums. He's polling around 1 in 5, 20%, 21%. Should he bring back Boris to improve things?
I mean, he could try. I noticed from Carrie Johnson's Instagram stories the other day, she was asking about inexpensive hotels. So I wondered if perhaps in the Johnson household we might be looking for a bit of extra work, pick up some more hours. So maybe. But my concern would be, is this just the desperate last gasp of a dying man? And should he perhaps not just go out with dignity, keep everything the same? Don't mess around with it anymore. Wait it out and then just go with a little bit of decorum, rather than frantically being like, oh, Holly Valance is cool, should we make her Chancellor of the Exchequer? And it does just feel very random and panicked.
And I suppose Rishi Sunak has had a lot of different relaunches over the last 12 months. You had the sort of anti-green Rishi, you had the pro-maths Rishi, you had the stick to the plan Rishi, you had the I'm the change candidate Rishi, you had the bring back David Cameron Rishi. I mean, we've had lots of different sort of attempts. Why not throw this into the mix?
Well, why not bring them all back? Why don't we dig up Boris, dig up David Cameron, dig up Liz Truss while we're at it?
Have a sale to get Margaret Thatcher involved.
It's bonkers. It's totally bonkers. This is like Brutus bringing back Caesar, isn't it? I mean, you don't think Caesar's going to walk in the door and go, we're best friends now. He's going to just try and destroy him. So it's a completely disastrous idea, even if he did want to do it. I don't think Boris would want to.
Why not?
Because, look, you're Caesar. You've just been stabbed in the back multiple times by all your allies and friends. You don't want to help them. You want to watch them fail and then come back and go, I told you so.
But Adam, he's got, like,
that's what I'd do.
Between 4 and 15 school fees to pay. He needs a job, and he hasn't made, I don't think, necessarily the inroads in the after-dinner speaking circuit that he was perhaps hoping.
You think going back into government will earn him more?
You've got to stay relevant.
No.
It's like when the last crop of Love Islanders become irrelevant because there's a new series of Love Island.
Right.
You've got to go back.
This is what I'm saying.
You've got to keep yourself in the ring.
This is what they're doing. They're building the all-star Tory party. This is like to bring them all back into one big... just bring them all back, dig them all back, and we'll whack them all in government together.
Where's William Hague when you need him?
Where is William Hague? With Angelina Jolie?
I mean, seriously, Boris Johnson pretty much got ousted, forced out. And at that time, they were polling better than they are now, Rebecca.
But I think also, if we'd known then what we know now, we would have stuck... Well, I don't have anything to do with it, but they would have stuck with what they had. But I think the most likely thing is that I always say, if you want to look at what Boris is going to do, just get out a really basic Wikipedia of Winston Churchill, and he, went out. Clement Attlee had his term, and then he let the Labour Party have 5 years, basically trying to undo the damages.
He
and
was leader of the opposition for all of that time.
Yes.
Perhaps this is more akin to when Winston Churchill was Home Secretary, Chancellor, and then Home Secretary, and then he was out of office, but also out of Parliament, went off to America for a long period in the wilderness before getting back in and then becoming leader again. By the time he was really quite old, might we now need to wait until Boris Johnson's perhaps a touch senile before
he's got to be nearly 60, hasn't he?
Boris Biden at this point. I mean,
is Keir Starmer.
So we're looking at Keir Starmer.
Fun fact: Keir Starmer is older than Nigel Farage.
Really?
Yeah.
Keir needs to drop the skincare.
Hang on. 60 is absolutely no age. I think that is a suitable age to be Prime Minister.
Yeah.
Perhaps Rishi Sunak is far too young and inexperienced. Perhaps he's the most over-promoted man in Britain.
Well, I can't disagree with that. I mean, all these politicians who rise up very quickly tend to have a lot of trouble at the start. Despite Liz Truss having a long time in cabinet and getting ousted in 10 minutes. But the reality is that they'll need to find him a seat if they want him back. And what seat is the other Tories going to win in a by-election before the next election? None.
What seat are they going to win at the election at all? Big question marks.
Exactly.
Another age fact. Kemi Badenoch, I believe, older than Rishi Sunak.
Yes, also, I believe had her most recent child at 39, which I think is amazing.
But
she looks so much younger than
She does look a lot younger.
So I just thought we'd do equal opportunities. We comment on men's age, we should also comment on women's age, all about...
I'm not sure that's equal opportunities.
Equal discrimination.
Just a bit rude in women's case.
Why is it rude for women and not rude for men?
It's just one of those things that you're hopefully taught as a young man, that you don't comment on a woman's age, let alone whether she looks her age.
I'm just trying to deliver absolute equality here, Emily.
So we've decided, probably, that bringing back Boris might not be the silver bullet option.
Maybe not.
Silver bullet
Maybe
option.
Not this time. But we can, of course, watch Boris Johnson during the election campaign and, indeed, the election results night right here on GB News.
Now that will be worth watching. Thank you very much, Rebecca and Alex. Up next, it's Martin. Martin, tell us what is coming up on your fantastic, brilliant show.
Well, that's very kind of you. Not quite as good as your show, but I do my best. We've got an action-packed menu after that barnstorming interview that's got the world talking. Is it time to negotiate with Vladimir Putin? He's clear. Bombs aren't working. Sanctions are working. Is it time to talk, or is that simply off the cards? And is Boris Johnson to blame for that breakdown of a peace deal? Has Boris got blood on his hands? We'll put that to a Tory MP. Starmer digs in on his £28 billion U-turn. Also, campus anti-Semitism breaks out once again, this time in Birmingham. And is the EU imploding? Britain's doing better than Poland, France, Germany, the bloc as a whole. And we've got huge elections coming up. Is it the end of the European Union? That's all coming on my show 3 till 6 p.m. But first of all, here is your latest weather forecast.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good afternoon, I'm Alex Deakin. This is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. The weekends should bring most of us some sunshine, but there will still be a few showers around. And so to begin with, there'll be snow across northern Scotland, still falling here at the moment. The Met Office yellow warning in place, mostly over the hills, but some of the higher routes here pretty tricky as that snow builds up and there's a gusty wind blowing. Through central and southern Scotland and Northern Ireland, it's outbreaks of rain. The heavy showers of the day clearing from England and Wales, so many places here will be dry with clear spells through the night. Could turn a bit misty, most places staying above freezing. And actually, for a good chunk of England and Wales, it'll be a fine day tomorrow. Starts pretty dull and damp in southern Scotland. Further wet weather in northern Scotland. By the end of the afternoon, the snow really confined to the tops of the hills. It'll be rain at lower levels, but still a cold wind blowing here. And through the day, showers will come into Wales and southwest England. Elsewhere, though, as I said, many places dry and bright and quite mild, actually. Double digits for many, maybe into the teens across the far south. Still pretty cold in northern Scotland. The wet weather clearing away over the Northern Isles during Sunday. There will then be plenty of showers coming in during Sunday to parts of Wales, central and southern England, and parts of western Scotland and Northern Ireland too. But some parts of the east may stay dry. Could be pretty drab though on Sunday. Mist and low clouds sticking around for much of the day. And just generally a greyer day compared to Saturday. And temperatures are touched down, but close to average for this time of year. Goodbye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Elon Musk has announced that the first patients to receive a groundbreaking brain implant from Neuralink is recovering well.
This is all a bit odd. The product, called telepathy, uses a robot to surgically place a computer chip in a region of the brain that controls movement.
Yes, Elon Musk says that the first goal is to enable people to control a phone or a computer just by thinking. He says that initial tests show promising signs of brain activity, meaning that patients with paralysis could one day overcome their conditions.
Not sure about this one. Joining us to discuss this breakthrough is applied futurist Tom Cheesewright. Tom, this sounds, well, slightly terrifying.
I certainly think a lot of people will be thinking this is something out of a sci-fi horror rather than reality. But this is a technology that's been a long time coming. We've been developing direct brain-computer interfaces for a long time, mostly for the sort of therapeutic reasons that are the initial goal, at least, of Elon Musk's Neuralink, to allow people who are perhaps quadriplegic to have direct control via their brains of initially a smartphone and maybe ultimately artificial limbs or a wheelchair.
It does seem fascinating how quickly this technology is moving on. I saw demonstrations perhaps a year or two ago of people playing a very simple Pong game just by thinking, moving sort of one line on a screen up and down. This seems like potentially there has been a breakthrough that means far more complex things can be controlled just by thinking.
Well, there's lots of different aspects to this technology. The initial attempts to interface with the brain used actually quite thick prongs almost that went into the brain, and they were quite solid, and so if the brain moved, they could potentially cause damage.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria DiPiero, bringing you
PMQ's Live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Good afternoon and happy Friday. It's 3 p.m. Welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News, broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster all across the UK. Today, I'll have the best analysis of the extraordinary interview with Vladimir Putin and ask the question most people are afraid to ask. Is it time to negotiate with Putin to end the war in Ukraine? Plus, there's more reaction to Labour's screeching U-turn on its flagship net zero policy, as Keir Starmer says voters would appreciate him being straight with them. Plus, there's the latest on the manhunt for Abdul Azidi, which staggeringly is now entering its 10th day. And the day after Prince William thanked the public for their best wishes after the King's diagnosis, old Prince Harry couldn't even be bothered to mention his father when he rocked up to a glitzy awards do in Las Vegas. That's all coming in your next hour. So welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us. Let's ask the big questions today. Let's not be afraid to put it out there. Is it time to negotiate with Putin? He was very, very clear in that extraordinary interview. Sanctions aren't working. In fact, Russia is getting wealthier by exporting more and more oil and gas during the war. Its GDP is going up. The bombs aren't working. It seems like Putin is digging in for the long haul. Is it time to negotiate, or is such a thing simply unconscionable? Let me know what you think. All the usual ways, gbviews at gbnews.com. But first, let's kick off with your latest news headlines with Sophia Wensler.
Thanks, Martin. Good afternoon. It's 1 minute past 3. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. Your top story this hour, Prince Harry has settled the remaining parts of his phone hacking claim against Mirror Group newspapers. The Duke of Sussex sued MGN for damages, claiming journalists at its publications were linked to methods including phone hacking and use of private investigators for unlawful activities. During the costs hearing today, his lawyer said the publisher would make an interim payment of £400,000. In a statement, the Duke of Sussex responded to the settlement results, saying his mission continues as he believes in the positive change it will bring for us all. The Prime Minister says President Vladimir Putin's accusations that the West and NATO are the cause of the Ukraine war are clearly ridiculous. In an interview with TV presenter Tucker Carlson, the Russian president says the invasion was necessary to prevent Ukraine from posing a threat to Russia by joining NATO. Meanwhile, Putin also told Carlson that he has no interest in expanding the war or to having any dialogue with US President Biden unless certain demands are met.
If you really want to stop fighting, you need to stop supplying weapons. It will be over within a few weeks. That's it. And then we can agree on some terms. Before you do that, stop. What's easier? Why would I call him? What should I talk to him about?
US President Joe Biden has hit back at special counsel who described him as an elderly man with a poor memory. It comes after an investigation found he mishandled top-secret files and said he struggled to recall key life events. Biden has been accused of keeping classified national security material at home, but he won't face criminal charges. Special counsel Robert Hur said he chose not to bring criminal charges because the president cooperated and would likely be difficult to convict. In a surprise news briefing last night, Mr. Biden insisted his memory is fine.
There's some attention paid to some language in the report about